Let's take it back to November 6th, 1983 in Hawkins, Indiana, for season 1, episode 1 of Stranger Things called The Vanishing of Will Byers. The series kicks off getting you hooked. It starts off at Hawkins National Laboratory where something creepy's going on. There's lights flickering, there's a scientist sprinting through the hallway, and he gets into an elevator. He's looking all around, he's trying to get the elevator to shut, but it's too late because what he's running from is right above his head, and he gets pulled up. Boom, that guy's gone. So we instantly know the stakes, and there's something out there dangerous in Hawkins. So then, for the first time, we meet our lovable group of friends, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will. They're in Mike's basement playing Dungeons and Dragons. This game, you could say, sets up the entire season, because what they're talking about in the game, they're confronted with a Demogorgon, and Will has to roll a 13 to throw a fireball at the Demogorgon, or he could do a protection spell, but he decides to go for it and try to get the 13. He rolls the dice fall off the table, they don't know where it went, and then Mike's mom says, hey, it's too late, everybody's got to leave. He begs for 20 more minutes. You've been playing for 10 hours already, everybody get out of here. So they leave, but before they leave, Will tells Mike, yo, I actually rolled a 7. The Demogorgon got me. So what happens next? They bike home, but we see Will takes a detour and he goes through the woods right near the lab that we just saw. And then we see a tall, shadowy figure, not really having a face. Yeah, it's the Demogorgon. Will runs away, ditches his bike, gets to his house. No one's home. He's running around. He sees the figure outside, so he decides to run out back, tries to load a gun, but then the lights flicker and he is gone. He's taken by the Demogorgon. Then we meet Jim Hopper for the first time. He is nursing a hangover and he's popping pills. David Harbour, that is. But when we first see him to what he ends up being in the series, he goes through many changes and he has a lot of heart and he really crushes this role. So then we see Will's mom, Joyce, played by Winona Ryder, who also does a great job. She notices he's missing. She calls Mike's house, talks to his mom, thinks that he's there, but he's not. So she's like, oh, maybe he just left early for school. But something is not sitting right. We see the kids go to school, and Dustin is bullied. He has to do some weird thing with his arms, and Mike's like, hey, it's like your superpower. You're like Mr. Fantastic. And he's like, oh, I don't really see it like that. So we see that these kids are kind of bullied. And then we meet Barb. Poor Barb. She's talking to Nancy, Mike's sister, wondering if he called that he is Steve, and she sees something in her locker, and then we cut to them kissing. And this is the first time we meet Steve, who comes off like a jerk at first, but he has maybe an even crazier arc than Hopper in this series. He's kind of the Jamie Lannister of this show. Comes off like a jerk at first, and he really comes to be a fan favorite. So he's trying to spend time with Nancy to, quote, study. She's not buying it. Back to Joyce. So she's frantic. She's calling around. She goes to the sheriff's office, and Jim Hopper kind of brushes it off at first, saying kids skip school all the time. Have you talked to his father? 99 times out of 100, they're with a relative, and she's like, no, that's not the case. She's not with him. I'll call him, but you're wrong. Something's wrong here. Please take this serious. And then we meet Dr. Brenner for the first time. He's kind of the guy behind everything at the lab. He has a really intense relationship with 11, who we're going to meet in just a second. And he gathers a team in hazmat suits, and they have guns, and they search around, and they get to an area where the Demogorgon came from. They ask about the girl, and he says she can't have gone far. Then we see her, 11. This is the introduction of her for the first time. She has a shaved head, hospital gown on, and she is hungry. So she just escaped the lab, and she gets to a diner, and she steals some fries. The guy who owns the diner, his name's Ben, he sees her and says, hey, what's going on? And he stops her. We'll come back to that in just a sec. So then Hopper goes to Hawkins Middle School to talk to Mike, Dustin, and Lucas, and he tells them to stay out of it, but they really want to help, and they realize that Will never made it home, so they decide they are going to search for him. He really wants them to stay out of it, which of course they don't do. So then we're back at the diner, and Benny, the man who caught 11 stealing fries, decides to make her a burger, but he wants her to answer some questions. Like, he's like, hey, I'm Benny, what's your name? And then he sees her tattoo. She kind of points to herself, being like, yeah, 11. The tattoo's 11, I'm 11, or at least that's what she goes by. And then he calls the authorities for someone someone to help. And then we see her telekinetic abilities for the first time when she stops a fan with her mind. Hopper was out looking for Will, and he found his bike. He brings it back to Joyce, and then he checks the house, and she's like, you don't think I checked the house? Like, what's going on? What about this mark on the wall? Was it always here? She's like, I don't know. I have 2 kids that live here. It could have always been there. So he decides to go out back to the garage where Will was indeed abducted. And then another cop shows up and he says, hey, let's get a search party going on. Let's check this out. This is serious. So at the search party, Mr. Clark is there, and he is a teacher that has a connection with the kids, and he is very helpful throughout the series. We see him a lot throughout the series. So then Mike and Lucas are talking on walkie-talkies, and Mike thinks that his actions in D&D are a reason why he is missing. He could have cast a protection spell, but he decided to go with a fireball that needed a 13, and we talked about that earlier, how he only rolled a 7. Pretty much is true, because he was literally fighting a Demogorgon in the game, and then he came up and got abducted by a Demogorgon in real life. So him and Lucas decide to meet up, and Dustin is going to meet them as well. Back to the diner, a woman claiming to be from social services shows up, and then she shoots him with a silencer. Bye-bye, Benny. Then 2 men go to apprehend 11, and she takes out both of them and gets away from Dr. Brenner's goons. And then Jonathan, Will's brother, we see he has put together some missing pictures and some flyers to help out. And then he starts to cry because he's like, I should have been there for him. I feel really bad. And then the phone rings. It's just static. We hear breathing, and then there's an electric shock that hits the phone. Jonathan picks it up, and they believe it was Will trying to communicate, which it was. So then we see the 3 friends are out searching for Will, and they run into 11. Here we go. On to episode 2, The Weirdo on Maple Street. It opens up in Mike's basement because Mike, Lucas, and Dustin had just stumbled upon a random little girl, and they don't know who she is, so they want to find out some stuff about her. So they ask her all types of questions, even if she has cancer, because of her shaved head. She's just silent. She doesn't want to say anything at all at the moment. And then they're like, hey, here, change. Put on these clothes. And she's about to change right in front of them, and Dustin has a little mini episode because of it. And they're like, no, go back here. So they take her back to a private room, but she doesn't even want to close the door fully because she's so scared because of where she just was. So she wants the door cracked a little bit, and she finally talks to Mike in this moment. As she's getting changed, the boys argue on what to do. Dustin wants to tell Karen, Mike's mom, and Mike shuts this all down. Lucas is against it too. He just wants to tell some parents, but Mike's like, no, we do it this way, and maybe we can find information out about Will. So they agree to keep it a secret. So they leave, and Mike sets up her tent for her to sleep in, and they talk. And he says, so what's your name? And he sees her tattoo, and he goes, wait, is that real? Sorry, I just never saw a tattoo on a kid before. And then she points at herself, saying, yeah, that's me, 11. And he goes, oh, cool, maybe we can call you L, short for 11. So they start to bond already. Hopper shows up to Joyce's house. She is a wreck. She's sure it was Will on the phone. He's skeptical. He's like, I don't know. It could be this, could be that. Have you talked to Lonnie, the father? No. All right, well, I'm going to go talk to him. And then Jonathan says he wants to go. And he says, no, stay here. Stay with your mom. I'll talk to him. He doesn't listen to him. Now Mike is at breakfast the next morning, and he eats his Eggos really fast, and he puts one aside for Elle, which starts her obsession of Eggos, which I love. Mike goes down to give her the Eggo, and he asks if she's in trouble. She just says, bad. Do they want to hurt you? And she puts 2 fingers up to her head like a gun, and then points them at him, saying, yeah, it's bad. It's real trouble. At school, Steve invites Nancy to a party, and then they see Jonathan hanging up a missing poster, and they're talking crap on him. The one kid says, oh, he probably killed him. And then Nancy feels bad, and she goes up to talk to him to try and console him, and their relationship really blossoms quite soon. Then we see that Mike had actually skipped school to show Elle around the house, and her first experience on a lazy boy is a roller coaster. She's having the time of her life. Joyce goes to the place she works to get a new phone since the last one got electrocuted. And she's talking to her boss. She's like, look, I'm going to need a 2-week advance. I've always worked holidays. I worked here for 10 years. Cut me some slack. And you know what? Throw a pack of Camels in there while I'm at it. Quickly, we see Dr. Brenner go to Joyce's house while no one's home with some of his goons, and they are getting readings, which takes them to the shed where Will was indeed abducted, and they see some type of residue on the wall, and Brenner says, get some samples from that. Back to Elle and Mike. She sees a picture of Will and points at it. Mike wants to know if she knows him. It seems like she does, but at this time, his mom comes home, so she has to hide in the closet, and he says, I promise it'll work out, and then she learns what the word promise means. The closed space gives her flashbacks of her being tested on while screaming Papa to Brenner. So this is as an audience when we learn that her and Brenner at least used to have a close relationship, and she's crying by the time Mike comes back, but she says, I'm okay, I promise. Jonathan then gets to his dad's house and he's looking for Will. But his dad seems like kind of a piece of shit and it doesn't really go anywhere. Lucas and Dustin then show up to Mike's house and they're freaked out that Eleven's still there. They're like, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? We gotta tell your parents. Then Mike says, no, guys, she knows about Will. She might be able to find him. And then Lucas freaks out. He starts demanding answers and then he's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm telling your mom. But then Elle uses her powers to slam the door and she says no. So they see that she has powers for the first time. Then Mike, Lucas, and Dustin bring Elle food again and apologize for earlier saying, hey, we just want to find our friend. And she goes, friend? And then she learns what a friend is. They tell her what it means. So she's learning new things today. And then Barb and Nancy are going to Steve's. You know, Nancy really wanted to go, but she kind of guilt-tripped Barb into going, saying, you know, it's going to be fun. Let's go. Barb's really hesitant about this. She does not want to go. And when they get there, she says, you know, he just wants to get in your pants, right? So she's really against this whole Steve situation. Then we see a scene of Elle with the gang and tells them that Will is hiding. They say, from who? The Demogorgon. She puts the D&D piece of the Demogorgon on the table and lets them know that that's what he's hiding from. So then we see Jonathan is out taking photos looking for his brother, and this comes in handy later on, but he hears screams. It's just Steve's party. They're shotgunning beers, having fun. Barb's not, so they peer pressure her to shotgun a beer, and she does, and it cuts her hand. Oh boy. Joyce was waiting by her new phone all day. She finally got a call, and it's just like last time. A lot of whispers, a lot of this and that, but the phone zaps again, and the connection is lost. And then shit goes crazy in her house. Lights are flickering. Something looks like it's coming through the wall, like a Demogorgon is coming through the wall. It's like she's on acid, and then she freaks out, leaves the house, but then sees the lights flickering again, and goes back inside, intent on figuring out what Will is trying to communicate to her. Back to Steve's house, Nancy tells Barb to just go home. She's fine. She's going up to his room, and Barb goes, hey, this isn't you. What are you doing? You should go home. And she's like, no, I'm gonna stay. I'm fine. Trust me, I'm fine. So Barb doesn't go home. She sits out by the pool, and Jonathan is still snapping pictures, and then we see a drop of blood, because her hand is cut, hits the pool, and then out of nowhere, the Demogorgon comes and snatches her up. Bye, Barb. Man, that poor girl didn't even want to be there. And Nancy and Steve are like 20 feet away making out as the episode ends. Episode 3 is called Holly Jolly. There's Barb. There she is. The episode kicks off showing us the Upside Down for the first time. She's trapped in a creepy, empty version of Steve's pool. She's covered in vines and slime. Doesn't look good. She's terrified, screaming for Nancy, but the Demogorgon shows up and it's closing in on her. At the very same time, Nancy and Steve are still making out. Barb is fighting for her life, literally, and the Demogorgon is throwing her around like a rag doll as she gets dragged into the pool. Then we see Nancy get home. It's very late. It's past 10 p.m. and her mom is pissed because of everything going on. She didn't want her to stay out late to begin with, and now she's even more mad. Jonathan sees his mom Joyce talking to nothing. She says he's trying to talk to me through the lights. He does not believe her, which leaves her very frustrated. He says she needs to stop and that the cops are going to find him. The boys and Elle are preparing to go search for Will. Dustin wants her to use her powers on demand, and Mike says, chill dude, she's not a doll, you can't just make her do it. Mike tells Elle to meet them after school when the numbers on the watch say 315, and then she repeats this to herself. Hopper and 2 other cops want to search Hawkins' lab. The security guard is giving them trouble, saying it's not possible. He's like, look, we just need 10 minutes tops. Elle is chilling at Mike's board, so she kicks back in a lazy boy again and then turns on the TV. Not a good idea, because as she's flipping channels, she gets to a Coca-Cola commercial, which gives her a flashback of her crushing a can of Coke with her mind. Meanwhile, Joyce is spiraling. She's convinced Will is communicating through the lights, despite Sheriff Hopper and others dismissing her as unhinged. She decides to double down, and she buys a ton of Christmas lights from the place she works at and tells her boss, just ring me up. This sets up something iconic from the show very soon. Hopper gets into the facility. The reason why he wants to be in there in the first place is because he found a piece of shredded clothes near the facility that looked like a hospital gown, and he's starting to suspect something shady is going on with them. He asks asks to look at the security tapes, but they are no help, and as they are leaving, he says they are lying. Then we go downstairs and we see the portal to the Upside Down more clear this time. What is Brenner up to? Jonathan is trying to process the photos from Steve's party, but someone walks in, they see the photos, and he runs out. Hopper is at the library looking up dirt on the lab. He sees an article where a woman named Terry Ives claims they took her daughter. So now he's really onto them. Mike's mom Karen and his baby sister Holly are at Joyce's house. They brought casserole, and Holly follows the blinking lights into Will's room. The Demogorgon starts to come through the wall again. Joyce runs in saying she can't be in here, and guess what, guys? Thanks for the casserole, but you gotta go. Nancy then calls Barb's mom, but she says she's not home and didn't come home last night. In fact, I thought she was staying at your house. That's what she said. I haven't seen her. And this conversation now makes Barb's mom very worried. The girl who saw Jonathan developing photos in the darkroom tells Steve about it, and Jonathan's snooping leads to a fight with Steve, who sees the pictures, takes them, calls him a creep, and smashes his camera. Nancy sees the photos, which are ripped up because Steve ripped them up, and she takes them with her. Elle shows up where she's supposed to be at 3:15, just like it said on the watch, 3:15. They aren't there yet. She sees a cat, and this leads to another flashback of a test that involves a cat, and she fails at it, so we see her being taken away, and the guards throw her in the room, but she stops the door with her powers and then kills the guards with her powers. Brenner walks up to her after this and says incredible, picks her up, walks right past the dead bodies with her in his arms. The boys then show up to pick up 11, and she hops on Mike's bike. Then we see all of the lights around Joyce's house that she set up, all the Christmas lights, they start to flicker all over the house. And then she comes up with an idea. She holds a bundle of lights and says, "Are you there?" The lights go off. She says, "All right, blink once for yes, blink twice for no. Are you alive?" "Yes." "Safe?" "No." She asks what to do and doesn't get an answer. So then she starts painting the alphabet on the wall. So cool. Hopper is sure Brenner is behind this, and maybe Will saw something he shouldn't have, but then he gets a call and he speeds off. The boys' search, led by 11, leads them to Will's house, and she says, "Hiding." And they go, "Here? No, this is where he lives. He can't be hiding here." But then they see cops and an ambulance speed by, so they decide to follow it. Then we get the iconic light wall. She has painted the alphabet with lights all around them so that Will could spell words out. She says, "Where are you?" He says, "Right here." Then she says, "What should I do?" And the lights spell out, "Run." And then the Demogorgon comes through the wall. Shit's crazy. So she runs off. Then we get the emotional gut punch, especially the first time watching this show. Hopper joins the search party by the quarry, and they pull a body from the water, and it looks like Will. Mike, watching from a distance, says, "It's not Will. It can't be." Lucas says, "That is Will." Mike is devastated. They're all crying, all the boys. And then Mike lashes out at 11 for giving them false hope. At the end of the episode, Mike is crying in his mom's arms, believing that Will is dead. On to episode 4, called The Body. The episode kicks off with everyone dealing of the discovery of a body at the quarry believed to be Will's. Hopper is telling Joyce about Will's body, and she says, "Whoever you found, it's not Will." She tells Hopper that she's been communicating with him through lights. "I talked to him a half an hour ago," she says. Hopper tries to console her by talking about his daughter Sarah, who died. He said when that happened, he saw her too. He didn't know what was real. She insists that this is different, saying, "I need you to believe me." He says, "Go to the morgue tomorrow and see him for yourself. But for now, get some sleep." She doesn't do that. She goes outside and grabs an axe and sits on the couch, ready for war. Over to Mike and 11. Mike is very upset. He's lashing out at 11. He's very mad. But 11 has other plans in mind. She's using her powers to tap into a radio signal, and it allows Mike to hear Will's voice. He's alive. He's singing "Should I Stay or Should I Go?", his favorite song. He's trapped somewhere in the Upside Down, and Elle confirms the voice was Will's. This gives Mike hope again, and it proves that Joyce isn't crazy after all. So Mike radios Lucas, who's not in the mood, and he says, "No, it's about Will. Get over here now and bring Dustin." Hopper finds out about Gary, the man who was supposed to do the autopsy, but he was sent home last night, and someone from the state did it. That's odd. Jonathan and Joyce go to see Will's body. Jonathan leaves upset, and soon after, Joyce storms out of the room saying, "That is not my son." Jonathan chases her down in the car, and he says, "Look, we have to deal with this. We have to prepare for the funeral." She says, "For who?" That thing down there? You think I don't know I sound crazy? I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm gonna bring home my son. Mike is trying to convince Dustin and Lucas that Will is still alive. So the plan is to get Elle a stronger radio, Mr. Clark's radio. So they need to get into school for that to happen. But they can't bring Elle the way she looks right now. So they need to put a wig on her and some makeup so they can sneak her into the school unnoticed. Nancy is then talking to the cops about Barb. They say, you think a bear took her? I don't know what it was, but I think it did take her. Hopper then talks to Gary about how he was kicked out of the room for the autopsy. Hopper is really suspicious now, and Gary says, it's weird. It's not like it was John F. Kennedy. It was Will Byers. Why would the Stadies take this over? The kids get to school. Mr. Clark sees them. He asks who Elle is, and she's about to say 11, but they say, oh no, Eleanor, my second cousin. He asks where she's from, and she says, bad place. It's actually really funny. But they say, no, she meant Sweden. You know, sub-zero temperatures. It's really cold. There's about to be an assembly for Will. He says, look, go there, pay your respects, and then you can use my radio all you want, as he tosses him the keys to the room. Nancy is looking at the ripped up photos that Jonathan took. She pieces them together, and you can see the outline of a Demogorgon on the edge, but it's really not clear, so she's gonna have to find Jonathan to develop a better copy. At the assembly for Will, the two bullies who were always picking on them are laughing. Elle noticed this. Mike confronts them, and they are just so rude and laughing and making a joke about it. So Mike pushes one of them down. He goes after Mike, and Elle stops him and makes him pee his pants. Fuck you, Troy. Nancy meets up with Jonathan to talk about Barb and the photos. He says she was there 1 second and then gone. I figured she bolted. Nancy then tells him that she thought she saw something the day after when she went back to Steve's. What did it look like? And then, at the same time, they both say, didn't have a face? Nancy says, how did you know? Hopper is at a local bar investigating the Stady that found Will. They talk for a little bit, and he knows he is lying to him because he knows the Stadies don't have jurisdiction over that area. The man says, look, the kid is dead, end of story, and he runs out. Doesn't get too far though, because Hopper beats his ass outside. He says, who told you to be out there? What are you hiding? The man says, they just told me to call it in and not let anybody get too close to the body. Then we see a car. Hopper pulls out his gun, goes after the car, but he speeds off, and both men get away. 11 and the boys are using Mr. Clark's radio, and she uses her powers, and then we hear it. We hear Will calling out for his mom. At the same time, Joyce hears it too. Sounds like it's coming from the wall, so she tears the wallpaper and sees him. He says it's like home, but it's so dark and very cold. Then we can hear the Demogorgon coming after him, so she says, run, but I'm gonna find you. And Joyce chops a hole in the wall, but it just leads to the outside. That's not how the upside down works. 11 is weak from using her powers to locate Will, so they wheel her out of there. Nancy and Jonathan are in the dark room developing photos from the night Barb disappeared, and there it is. You can see the Demogorgon. Nancy says, that's what I saw. This discovery confirms that something otherworldly is stalking Hawkins. Also, it makes Jonathan now believe his mom. Hopper is very skeptical of everything going on, so he decides to go to the morgue. There's a Stady guarding the door, and he tries to talk to him for a second and says, you know what, screw this, and he knocks him out. He goes inside, he locates the body, pushes down on it, and something's off. So he brings out his knife and slices into the body. It's cotton, like a stuffed animal. Then we see Lonnie show up to Joyce's house, and they hug. The episode ends with Hopper breaking into Hawkins' lab. He wants to figure out what they're hiding. On to episode 5, called The Flea and the Acrobat. This episode kicks off with Hopper sneaking past security. He goes past the quarantine area, and then before he knows it, someone pulls a gun on him. But before they know it, he knocks them out. And then he steals a badge from the other guy to get to where he needs to go. Hopper is deep in a restricted area, calling out Will's name, believing he might be in there. And then he stumbles into 11's room. We can tell it's hers because of the picture up that says Papa. Over to 11 and the boys, she tells them about the upside down. And then Mike tries to make sense of it to Dustin and Lucas by using D&D as a reference. They pull out their D&D guidebook and compare it to the Veil of Shadows. They ask Elle how to get there, and she says she doesn't know how. Then Hopper sees the entrance to the upside down, but men in masks inject him with something and he is knocked out. Jonathan comes home and notices his father is there, and he is not happy with that. He asks Joyce if the thing she saw came back. His dad's all pissed, saying don't feed into this, she needs serious help, and then he tells his dad, go home. Then we see everyone getting ready for the funeral because we know it's not really Will's body. They go because Hopper didn't get to tell anyone that the body was a fake. Then Hopper wakes up at his house. He pulls his gun, goes outside. He's like, what the hell just happened? And he's searching his place for bugs. He basically trashes his entire house before he finally finds the bug. Nancy and Jonathan talk about tracking the Demogorgon. What do we do if we see it? We kill it, and then Jonathan gets a gun. The boys then talk to Mr. Clark about alternate dimensions. He tells them about parallel universes. How would we get to the Veil of Shadows, though? And he knows what that is. He says, picture an acrobat. In our universe, we can move forward or backwards. So can a flea. But a flea can travel on the side and underneath the rope. They ask, is there any way for the acrobat to get there? He folds the paper in half and then jams a pen through it and says, only if you can create a doorway. They ask, what if it already exists? He says, we would probably know if it did. The boys, with their info from Mr. Clark, ask if Elle knows where the gate is. But Dustin is focused on compasses only in this moment. He says, guys, pull out your compasses, and they have a lot of them. North is not true north, and he says you can change the direction with a magnet. So, if we follow the compasses north, they should lead us to the gate. Elle looks very worried because she does not want to go back there. Joyce found some paperwork about a lawyer, so she's pissed that Lonnie is just trying to exploit the situation for a lawsuit and monetary gains. She stays firm and tells Lonnie to leave. He calls her a mess, and she says, just get out of my house. Jonathan is then doing target practice with the gun, and he's bonding more with Nancy, and then she grabs the gun and hits the can on her first try. Lucas asks Dustin if he thinks Elle is acting weirder than normal as they are following the compasses north. Then we see a flashback of her going to the bath, as they say, to do a task for Brenner. She is lowered in with an oxygen mask on. She then tells Mike to turn back. Hopper knocks frantically at Joyce's house with a sign that says don't say anything, because he thinks her house is bugged too. Back to the boys, Dustin thinks something is screwing with the compasses. Lucas blames Elle. And then he sees blood on her sleeve, and he knows it's her using her powers because she always bleeds when she does. Then she says it's not safe. Back to Hopper, he can't find bugs, so he thinks it's safe to talk to Joyce. He tells her about the morgue, that it wasn't Will's body. It was a fake. You were right all along. Lucas is pissed, and he tells Mike to wake up. Then Mike gets pissed at Lucas, and he tackles him, and then Elle tosses Lucas. Wow. Back to the flashback, Elle finds the man Brenner wanted her to find, and they can hear what he is saying in Russian. Then he's gone, and then she's being chased by the Demogorgon. Lucas wakes up pissed, and he walks off, but Elle is gone too. They are calling out her name, but she's nowhere to be found. Back to Nancy and Jonathan, since they teamed up to investigate. They find a wounded deer in the woods. They were going to put it out of its misery, but it's snatched away by the Demogorgon. Nancy follows its trail into a slimy portal in a tree, which leads to the Upside Down. So Nancy is fully in the Upside Down at this moment, and she sees the Demogorgon eating the deer inside of it. It goes after her, and the episode ends with Jonathan calling out her name. On to episode 6, called The Monster. Nancy is still stuck in the Upside Down, running from the Demogorgon, hiding, and she hears Jonathan's voice. He says, follow my voice. Then she sees the tree where the portal is to get out, and Jonathan is on the other side of the portal. Then boom, her hand pops out. He falls back, and then he pulls her out. She's really scared and shook, and they are hugging, and then we see the portal closes back up. Then Steve goes to check on her, and he sees Jonathan is in her room consoling her. He gets jealous, and this matters later. Hopper is with Joyce, and he's telling her about the lab and how he saw Eleven's room. He doesn't know it's Eleven's room. He just said it was a kid's room. He said it felt like a prison. She said, how do you know it was a kid's room? He said, because there was a stuffed animal, there was drawings. It was a kid's room. She says, were the drawings any good? He says, no, they were kid drawings. It was stick figures. And then she says, well, it can't be Will then. And then she shows his drawings, which are really good for a kid. Then he remembers what he saw when he was looking up dirt. He brings up Terry Ives, who claims she lost her daughter Jane and that they took her. She sued, but nothing happened. Hopper comes to the realization, what if he's been tracking the wrong kid? Nancy takes a shower, and she's really shaken up after seeing the Demogorgon and getting so close to it, and she asks Jonathan to stay the night. He sets up on the floor to sleep there, but she says, nope, get up here. I'm terrified. I need you in bed. The next morning, Nancy comes up with a plan on how to draw the Demogorgon out. She said Barb was bleeding, the deer was bleeding. What if blood can draw it out, and then we can trap it and kill it? So that's their plan. Over to Mike. He's upset for yelling at Elle since she was just trying to protect them. Dustin says that might be true, but look, you need to make up with Lucas. You hit him first. That's the rule. You gotta shake his hand. So first we'll do that, and then we'll go find 11. Then we see her. She slept in the woods, and she's hiding out by herself. Back to her in a second. second. Mike apologizes to Lucas. He says he'll shake his hand if they go on without 11. And then they cannot agree on this. Mike's like, we need 11. She has powers. If we go without her, it's like R2-D2 facing Darth Vader by himself. We have no shot without her. Back to 11. She's on the run. It seems like she's struggling with guilt. Then we see a flashback of her time in Hawkins' lab where Brenner is pushing her to make contact with the Demogorgon. So she goes in the sensory deprivation tank, and we get more on this later. And this is how the portal to the Upside Down was opened. Elle's journey leads her to a grocery store, and she steals some Eggo waffles, which is very iconic. And then on the way out, someone's saying, hey, you have to pay for that, and she slams the door and it shatters. Hopper and Joyce get to Terry Ives' house. She's not speaking, and her sister says, you're wasting your time. Lucas gets ready for war solo. Mike and Dustin head out too. They get to the store that Elle robbed and know she was there, so they decide to follow her tracks. Terry's sister said she had a miscarriage in her third trimester, so it's not possible that they stole her kid. She says she pretends that Jane is real, and she's special, born with abilities. And while she's saying this, they cut in Elle using her powers throughout the show. She explains the abilities that Terry Ives said she has, and they all match up with what 11 can do. So maybe Terry's not so crazy. Nancy and Jonathan are shopping for supplies to kill the Demogorgon. Nancy says they are monster hunting as they are checking out. Someone drives by and says, can't wait to see your movie, Nancy. And then she panics. She runs to the movie theater, and it says Nancy the Slut on the now playing sign. Then she sees Steve in an alley. He accuses her of cheating, tells her to go to hell, and then he calls Jonathan a screw up, calls his whole family a screw up, talks shit on Will, and then Jonathan loses it and punches him. Steve tackles him, but Jonathan ends up beating his ass. He gets arrested for this, and Steve runs off. Elle is eating Eggos and hears the boys calling out for her, but then the bullies show up and they pull out a knife, so they're not messing around. They chase them to the edge of the cliff of the quarry. Troy ends up holding a knife to Dustin's neck, and he says he's gonna take his teeth out. He wants to know how he made him pee his pants. Dustin starts to say that they have a friend with superpowers. He doesn't believe it, so he says, I'll let Dustin go if you pee your pants or jump off the edge of the quarry. Dustin tells him not to, but Mike wants to do it. So he heads to the edge and he steps off, but Elle stops him from falling midair and puts him back on the ground right next to all the boys. And then there she is, looking bad ass. She throws the one down and breaks Troy's arm, says go, and they run off. She faints, and then more flashback time. She walks up to the Demogorgon, touches it, and then screams. She wakes up and says sorry about the gate. She is the one who opened it. And then she calls herself a monster. He says, you're not a monster. You saved me. But she did open the gate. But it's really Brenner's fault because he made her touch the Demogorgon. He wanted to make contact. Then we see a man working for Brenner sees the boys and 11, and he calls it in. So they go out locked and loaded. Lucas spots them, and then the final shot of the episode is Mike, Dustin, and 11 heading inside, and danger looms. Episode 7 is called The Bathtub. Kicks off with Elle getting cleaned up, and her and Mike make up. He apologizes. Then they almost kiss. Dustin says Lucas is in trouble as he hears him calling out from his walkie-talkie. He gets a connection, and he screams, they know about 11, and the bad men are coming. Mike spots the van outside, and Dustin says, let's get out of here. Outside on the bikes, Brenner spots Elle and they take off. Vans are on their tail, they're right behind them, and then they're getting closed in from both sides, and boom, Elle flips the van in front of them. So iconic. When they are safe, Lucas says, that was awesome. Then he apologizes to Elle for saying that she's not on their side. She says, friends don't lie, I'm sorry too. Mike's sorry, everyone's sorry. And then Mike and Lucas finally shake hands. Hopper and Joyce get to the station and they find the monster hunting supplies in Jonathan's trunk. He's asked to explain this. He says, you're not going to believe me. Hopper says, give me a try. The boys and Elle discuss how to get into the lab. They call it a fortress, and Lucas says it's guarded by soldiers. And then a helicopter is over them and they hide inside an abandoned bus. Jonathan and Nancy then share their info on them hunting the Demogorgon. And then Troy comes in to tell on 11 for breaking his arm. And he tells Hopper about her powers. And it's all starting to make sense to Hopper now. Hopper notices the chopper and he says that's for them. Jonathan has an idea of how to find them, so he goes home and gets the walkie-talkie. They don't trust it, think it's a trap, until Hopper talks and he finally answers. Armed men show up to where they are hiding. He's about to go on the bus, and then Hopper takes him out and the others out and he says, let's go. Mike then gives everyone the info about the Upside Down, basically what he learned from Mr. Clark. Joyce and Nancy ask if 11 can locate and talk to Will and Barb. She tries, but they realize that she's gonna need a stronger signal. Dustin calls out Mr. Clark, who was literally Netflix and chilling at the time, and he asks for science help about how to build a sensory deprivation tank. He wants to pick this up later, but Dustin gets him talking. And then they know what they need. They need a bathtub, kiddie pool in this instance, and about 1,500 pounds of salt. Hopper knows where to get the salt, and they bring it all to the middle school. Joyce gives Elle a prep talk and calls her very brave. They get the tub to the perfect temperature and load the salt in. She pops the duct tape mask on and goes inside. 11 is floating, and then we get a really cool transition to the Black Void. And first she's calling out for Barbara, but she's already dead, unfortunately, and she keeps repeating gone and freaking out, and Joyce calms her down, saying, I'm right here. And then she sees Castle Byers, Will's hideout at home. She locates Will inside. He's alive, but trapped and not doing well. She says, your mom is coming for you. He says, hurry. And Elle tells him just to hold on a little longer. Hop and Joyce plan to go get him. Nancy tells Jonathan they are going to need help. She wants to kill the Demogorgon. Hop and Joyce break into the lab, but they are immediately surrounded by a bunch of men with guns. The final shot of the episode is the Demogorgon going after Will in his hideout, and he breaks it down. On to the season 1 finale called The Upside Down. We see that Joyce and Hop are separated in the lab and are being questioned. Brenner is talking to Joyce, saying, I know you've been in contact with Will. How? Then he admits that they don't understand this thing, the Demogorgon. Says it will take more kids, sons and daughters. I want to save Will, but I can't without your help. But she's pissed for everything he's done, including faking Will's death. Over to Hop, he's being tased, and they ask what he knows. He says everything. He knows they killed Benny and faked Will's death. They ask who he's working with. Nobody. But I did give all of this info to my buddy at the Times. Then they say they're gonna kill him and frame it as an overdose. Hop says, let us go. We'll find Will and we'll forget this ever happened. Over to the kids, Mike noticed that Jonathan and Nancy are gone. He wonders where they went. Elle just says, Demogorgon. Then we see them. They are at the Byers house, rigging it up, preparing for battle. Back to Brenner, he asks Hop where the girl is. He says, give me your word, you leave the boys alone, and I'll tell you. Then they make a deal with Brenner. They will enter the Upside Down to rescue Will, but they had to tell them where Elle is. So they get suited up in hazmat gear, and they breach the gate at the lab. Here we go. They are in the Upside Down now, and Hop starts having flashbacks of his daughter dying. Nancy and Jonathan have their strategy down pat. Time to cut themselves, draw some blood, and draw the Demogorgon out. But Steve shows up to apologize. But he sees the house is all rigged up. He's like, what is going on? Nancy pulls a gun on him and says, get out. But it's too late. The Demogorgon shows up. Steve is so confused as it comes through the wall. They wait by the door for their plan to proceed, but the Demogorgon sniffed it out. In the Upside Down, Joyce finds the wreckage of Castle Byers, and she starts calling out his name. Hop sees a stuffed animal and keeps having flashbacks of his daughter dying of cancer. Steve is freaking out. He tries to use the phone, and they just say, dude, you need to leave. We want it to come back. So he runs outside to his car, but he sees the lights flickering inside again. And then it shows back up. It takes Jonathan down. Nancy empties her clip at it. And then Steve, he shows back up with the bat with the spikes on it, and he fucks it up pretty good. And then it gets stuck in the bear trap. Then they light it on fire. Jonathan puts out the blaze, but it's gone. But they definitely heard it. Joyce and Hop are in the exact same spot in the Upside Down because the lights are going off where they walk. It's really cool. Hop notices that the Demogorgon was hurt, and Joyce can hear Jonathan, but they must proceed. They gotta find Will. Dustin finds the stash of chocolate pudding, claiming he wants to recharge 11, and Mike is talking to her, saying, after all this, you can come move in with us. She's like, you'll be like my brother? He goes, no, that's different. Maybe we can go to the snowball together. You go to a dance with someone that you like. He's trying to explain what this means to her, but then he just kisses her. Very sweet. But Brenner and his team show up and storm the school, but the kids are not going down without a fight, especially 11. 11 kills a shitload of them all at once as they are bleeding from the eyes, including the woman that killed Benny. Then we see Brenner. The boys say fuck off, but they're picked up. Brenner picks up 11 and she says Papa. He says he'll take her back home. Elle is very weak. She calls out for Mike, but all the blood from the goons that she just killed drew the Demogorgon as it breaks through the wall. The men start shooting at it and the boys pick up 11. At this point, the Demogorgon has taken out all of Brenner's goons, and there he is, standing there helpless. The Demogorgon tackles him. Bye bye, Papa. Back to the Upside Down, Joyce and Hopper see Barbara dead. And then they find Will. He's in the library. It looks like he's hooked up to a slimy vine like a human IV drip. They cut him free, and Hop shoots the slug that was inside his mouth. Mike and Elle then share a heartfelt moment as he promises they will go to the snowball dance. And then we hear the gunfire stop outside of the classroom as the Demogorgon breaks down the wall. Lucas is using his slingshot and they are trying their best. Then he takes one last try and it gets thrown back. He thinks it might have been him, but nope, there's Elle. She's weak. Mike says stop, but she tosses him back. The Demogorgon is pinned to the wall. She looks back and says goodbye, Mike. He's crying. She says no more. She puts her hand up, drawing all the power she has left as she lets out a scream, and the Demogorgon evaporates like a Thanos snap. But she's gone too. They're calling out her name, but she is gone. In the Upside Down, Will is not breathing. They give him CPR as more flashes of Hopper's dying daughter appear on screen, but he's not gonna let Will die. And then he comes to. He's embraced by Joyce, and Hop puts a mask on him. Then we see Will at the hospital. Jonathan and Joyce are there, and then the boys go in to hug him, and they tell him all about their adventures of trying to find him. They let him know all about 11, a new friend they met with superpowers, and they're all laughing about it. Cut to 1 month later. It's Christmas time, and they're back in Mike's basement playing D&D, how this all started. They're having a ball. Jonathan arrives to pick up Will, and Mike looks to where Elle's tent used to be, very sad. On the way out, Nancy gives Jonathan a Christmas gift and kisses him on the cheek. He finds out it's a new camera, since Steve broke his last one. Then she sits on the couch next to Steve, who's cool now, but come on, she loves Jonathan. Then we get a cryptic hint for season 2. Hopper leaves food and Eggos in a lockbox in the woods. 11 is still out there somewhere. Will's back at home, and he's off. He goes to the bathroom and he coughs up a slug. And he's also still seeing flashes of the Upside Down. Poor kid. He sits down with Joyce and Jonathan to eat. He doesn't share what just happened to him as the theme song plays us out.
Will Byers is back home, but life isn't quite back to normal. Season 2 kicks off with episode 1, Mad Max. We open not in Hawkins, but in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where a group of masked criminals speed away from a robbery and we see the police are close behind them. One of them, a girl with short hair and intense eyes, sits silently and focused. As the police close in, she shuts her eyes and mutters something under her breath. Suddenly, up ahead, a tunnel collapses. The police car slams on its brakes and crashes, but when the dust settles, the tunnel is still intact. The collapse never happened. The girl named Callie opens her eyes, her nose is bleeding, seem familiar, and on her wrist is a faded tattoo, 008, just like 11, another experiment child. She breathes heavily, and then the van speeds away. Transition back into Hawkins, Indiana. Everything looks peaceful as the boys, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will, ride their bikes and make their way to the arcade. But something is off. Dustin's top score on Dig Dug has been beaten by someone named Mad Max. Cue the mystery. The boys argue about who could possibly be Mad Max. Meanwhile, Will zones out and the lights of the arcade begin to flicker. He steps outside the arcade into what seems like the Upside Down. The sky has turned red, black clouds swirl above the town. In the distance, a massive spidery shadow creature looms over Hawkins. Will begins to tremble as the monster moves, and then he blinks and everything is back to normal. He sees Mike, who has snapped him out of his hallucination, and he realizes nobody else saw it. Poor Will. Back at school, while the boys are discussing who Mad Max could possibly be, we meet the new kid, Maxine, or Max, a cool and tough redhead with skateboarding skills, a mysterious past, and a stepbrother named Billy who looks like he came straight out of an 80s teen movie villain casting call. Dustin and Lucas are immediately intrigued by Max, but Mike, who is still heartbroken by 11's disappearance, just isn't impressed. Back at home, Joyce is dating a new guy named Bob Newby, played by Sean Astin, a personal favorite of mine. He is lovable, awkward, and safe. Bob is completely unaware of the supernatural events that have occurred in the past. He's a harmless guy who seems like he's going to bring a bit of comic relief to this season. We love Bob. Meanwhile, Chief Hopper is called to a pumpkin patch where all the crops are rotting, the soil is black, slimy, and gross. The farmer blames his neighbor, but Hopper finds similar decay at other farms too. Joyce, who is ever protective, takes Will to see Dr. Owens at Hawkins National Laboratory. Will gets examined and has some tests done, but Dr. Owens assures Joyce that Will is fine and that he is just experiencing PTSD. But Will thinks differently. Dustin returns home and hears something strange in his trash can. He grabs a hockey stick and opens the lid, but finds nothing. He continues to hear rustling. He assumes it's a raccoon. I think we all know it's not a raccoon. We then see Mike still calling out to 11 on the walkie-talkie, which he has done every single night since her disappearance. His parents grow frustrated, but Mike refuses to give up hope. He doesn't want to believe she's actually gone. The episode ends with Hopper driving into the woods as dusk falls. He walks through trees to a hidden cabin. The door opens and there she is, 11, alive and well. Her curly hair is longer now. Her expression is cautious but familiar. She's been living in secret this whole time, hidden from the world. Hopper brings her dinner, Eggo waffles of course. They sit in a comfortable silence. She is safe for now. Going right into episode 2 called Trick or Treat Freak, grab some Eggos and buckle up because we're heading into Halloween night where things are about to get seriously strange. The episode starts with a flashback of how 11 escapes the Upside Down. She emerges from a hole in the wall at the school and she flees into the forest. Hunted by agents, alone and starving, we see how she survives before Hopper finds her. Cut to the woods. Hopper's cabin is looking peaceful until a door bursts open. 11 appears, scowling. She's very frustrated. Hopper, who is now her secret caretaker, lays down some rules. She is allowed to dress up for Halloween, but no going outside. No exceptions. He promises her candy if she obeys his rules. It's clear she's getting restless, and their dynamic is equal parts fatherly and tense. We go to Will's house in the morning before school. He's getting ready in his room with the help of Joyce when she notices one of his drawings of the monster figure in the sky that he saw at the arcade the night before. She's very concerned and she asks him what it was, but he assures her everything is fine and that it's just a sketch for a story he's writing. What a liar. The boys, Mike, Will, Dustin, and Lucas, stride into school in full Ghostbusters gear, proton packs, jumpsuits, the whole thing. But when they enter the halls, they are shocked and embarrassed to see that no one else is wearing costumes. They're alone and suddenly painfully aware of how young and geeky they look. At Hawkins High, Steve and Nancy are prepping for Tina's Halloween party. Steve gives Nancy a loving pep talk, reminding her to have fun tonight. But Nancy is quiet because her mind is still on Barb, rightfully so, and there's a heaviness she can't shake, and Steve just doesn't quite understand it. Dustin and Lucas see Max in the hallway and ask her to go trick-or-treating with them. They thought it would be nice to invite her since she is new and probably doesn't have any friends, but she makes fun of them, brushes them off, and walks away. It's Halloween night and the boys are trick-or-treating, excitement's in the air. Max surprises them actually by joining in, and she's dressed as Michael Myers, which I love, and she plays a prank on them, jumping out with a knife and scaring them half to death, and it's the first time we actually see her let loose. I love it. As the group walks through the neighborhood, Dustin and Lucas continue vying for Max's attention. Mike, meanwhile, is quiet and distant and still thinking about 11. At the Halloween party, Nancy downs drink after drink, visibly unraveling, and when Steve tries to stop her, she completely lashes out. In a drunken haze, she blurts out what she's been holding in since Barb's disappearance, I guess, and she says, quote unquote, "This is all bullshit, we're bullshit." Steve is stunned and hurt that their perfect couple act is crumbling in front of everyone. In the background, we do see Jonathan. He's come probably only to keep an eye on Nancy. He watches it unfold from the sidelines, concerned, heartbroken, and unsure whether to step in. Back on the trick-or-treat route, Will suddenly freezes. He's no longer on a quiet suburban street. He's in the Upside Down. The air is thick with ash like we've seen last season. The sky is swirling mass of red and black. And then he sees it, the towering shadow monster, stretching across the sky like a living storm, and it turns towards him. But just as suddenly, he snaps back to reality, gasping for air. Mike rushes to his side. Will was trembling and shaken to his core. Something is very, very wrong with him. Later that night, Hopper returns to the cabin with candy and horror movies. It's quiet and cozy and almost normal, but 11 is still staring at the TV, longing and missing Mike, missing her freedom. So she goes against Hopper's rules and she uses her powers to see Mike, who is talking to her on the walkie-talkie in his basement like we saw last episode, and it's just so heartbreaking. As Dustin is getting back home after trick-or-treating, he hears something in his trash can again. He walks towards it very scared, and we see his shocked expression as he opens the garbage can and the episode ends. Episode 3, The Pollywog. Things start moving fast, secrets unravel, relationships shift, and a mysterious new creature crawls into the spotlight. Let's break it all down. We open right where we left off with Dustin bringing whatever he found in his trash can into his house. He takes his turtle out of the tank, poor turtle, and puts the creature he just found inside of it. It's small, slug-like, with tiny limbs and a lizard-like face, kind of cute. Dustin seems very excited about it and names him Dart, but we all know with this show that this can't be a good thing. In another flashback with 11, we see the night that Hopper finally finds her in the woods after she escaped the Upside Down last season. She's cold and starving, and they show us how their bond formed, how they have a special code over the radio, and how he's really doing everything he can to make it safe for her to leave again. I love these flashbacks because we really get to see how their relationship has grown and how much 11 really does mean to Hopper. Back in real time, 11 is getting more and more frustrated that she's in hiding and she can't speak to her friends or to anyone really. Hopper keeps telling her that she'll be able to leave soon, but she's counting the days, and at this point it's been over 200 stuck inside the cabin, so when Hopper leaves, she goes against his rules and she leaves too. On the way to school, Bob thinks he's being helpful by giving Will advice, telling him that the next time he has one of his hallucinations to stand his ground instead of run away. This comes into play later. We shift to Dustin in the library. He's checking out books all about different types of reptiles and amphibians. He's trying to find out what Dart is, but he comes to the conclusion that he has found a brand new species. Steve and Nancy are finally talking after what happened the night before at the party. She says she doesn't remember any of it, she's too drunk, but Steve is standing his ground, saying that just because she doesn't remember it doesn't mean that she wasn't speaking truthfully. He asks her to say that she loves him, but she can't. So basically their relationship is over. And 5 seconds later, she's with Jonathan. Welp. Hopper realizes that all the rotten crops are all within a 3-mile radius surrounding Hawkins' laboratory. He is sure that whatever rot is spreading is coming from there. He has Dr. Owen's team collect samples to test, and Dr. Owen seems to know something but is playing dumb. Dustin sneaks Dart into school and shows him off to the boys, but Will instantly recognizes the sound it makes, saying that he remembers it from the Upside Down. The boys try to warn him, but Dustin doesn't want to hear it. He already loves Dart and feels proud that he found a new species. Back at Nancy's house, her and Jonathan are working together and scheming. After her emotional breakdown at the party, she's done playing nice and she's ready to expose Hawkins' lab for covering up Barb's death. She calls Barb's parents and asks to meet in person, but not to call back on the phone because it isn't safe. We then get a quick glimpse of an unknown person listening in on the phone call. Back at school, Max is starting to realize how standoffish Mike is with her, so she pushes him and questions him about why he doesn't want her a part of the gang. He can't tell her about 11, so he just tells her that she's annoying. She's getting really curious about what happened to Mike and the boys in last season, but they're all afraid to open up and put her at risk for knowing too much. 11, who we saw earlier escape the cabin, made her way to the school and overheard this conversation from afar. Things get much worse when Dart escapes Dustin's locker and they all split up searching the halls and every room to find him. Dustin does end up finding him in the bathroom, but when Mike and Max walk in, he doesn't tell them that he found him. Will, who doesn't know that they found Dart, is still looking when he hears a noise that sounds very familiar, so he follows it, and suddenly he's back in the Upside Down. He runs outside and he sees the monster figure again, but this time, thanks to Bob's advice, he doesn't run away. He stands his ground, but it was actually a terrible idea because instead of the monster disappearing in seconds like it has, it enters inside of him through his mouth, and the episode ends very chilling. Episode 4, Will the Wise, picks up exactly where we left off. The danger is no longer just outside the Byers' home, it's inside of Will. Joyce finds Will trembling, pale, and soaked in sweat after his terrifying encounter with the shadow monster. She brings him home and starts to ask him what happened. At first he says that everything just went blank and he doesn't really know what happened, but the more she pushes him, the more he opens up. Will broke my heart when he starts to cry, saying that he really tried to keep the monster away, but that it got him. He said that he felt it everywhere and that he even still feels it now. At the cabin, Hopper storms in furious. He knows 11 broke his no-leaving rule and she tries to defend herself, but Hopper shuts her down. The fight escalates so bad where 11 is using her powers to throw things at him. She tells him that he's just like Papa, referring to Dr. Brenner. She runs into her room and slams the door and breaks down crying. He continues yelling at her from outside the door, and she screams so loud using her powers to shatter every window in the cabin. In the morning, Joyce notices something new. Will's body is freezing cold, but he says that he feels hot, like he's burning from the inside, and he also tells her he doesn't recognize the place in his visions anymore. It's not just the upside down, it's something deeper. And Joyce is now certain Will's symptoms are supernatural and not medical. Since he's so cold, Joyce tries to draw him a warm bath, but he ends up draining the water and telling her that it likes it cold. And then he eerily walks away, and she's left with this shocked expression on her face, which I don't blame her. It was super creepy. Cut to Nancy and Jonathan, who are going through with their plan to speak with Barb's parents and expose Hawkins' lab. While they're sitting on the bench waiting for Barb's mom, who is late, they start noticing random people staring at them suspiciously. So they try to leave, but the car won't start, and a man comes right up to their window, knocking and smiling. Joyce, who is now terrified for her son's life, calls Hopper to come over to speak with Will. Will tells Hopper that he has these memories in the back of his mind, except that they aren't his and that they aren't old memories. He feels like they are things that are happening right now all at once. He describes underground tunnels spreading throughout Hawkins, and Hopper pieces it together that whatever Will is seeing is related to the rotting crops he's been investigating. To get a better idea of what Will is actually seeing, they ask him to draw it out. Heading over to the school where Mike and the boys are worried about Will because he didn't show up today, Mike, not knowing that Dustin has Dart, says that they have to find him because they think it's connected to what Will is experiencing, and that maybe if they have Dart, they can help Will somehow. Dustin seems conflicted because he looks upset and like he knows he should turn Dart over, but he doesn't. In this emotional scene at the cabin, Eleven is cleaning up after her and Hopper's fight. She finds a loose floorboard and underneath a box labeled Hawkins Lab that is filled with information on a woman named Terry Ives, an Indiana woman who claims her daughter Jane was stolen at birth. She finds a picture of this lady with Dr. Brenner and uses her powers to see the woman like she did with Mike. And once she gets close, Terry, who appears to actually see Eleven, looks up at her and calls her Jane. Terry is her biological mother, and the scene ends with Eleven breaking down and calling out Mama. This scene is so sad because Eleven is realizing that Hopper, the one person she actually trusts, has been keeping this secret from her. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan get brought to Hawkins' laboratory where Dr. Owen shows them whatever this is and that it's his job to contain it. He expresses that even though it's sad that Barb died, it was a mistake that he's trying to keep from happening again. He says he's trying his best to keep it contained, but the more attention they bring to it, the harder it is to keep from getting out of hand, basically threatening them not to tell Barb's parents. We shift back to Will, who's drawing picture after picture while Joyce and Hopper connect them. They're connecting the pictures all over the floor, and Joyce can't figure out what it is, but Hopper thinks that there's some sort of vines, and he storms out. We find out a little bit more about Max's personal life in the scene where her brother Billy sees her talking to Lucas outside of school, and when she gets in the car, he grabs her by her wrist, calls her a piece of shit, and threatens her not to talk to Lucas or any of the boys anymore. Max is visibly upset afterwards, and in this moment, we see why she had this wall up with the boys at first. She has a toxic life at home, and it honestly makes you feel really, really bad for her. We go back to Nancy and Jonathan after they leave Hawkins' lab. They reveal that they have a tape recorder in their bag the entire time they were there and have recorded everything Dr. Owen said to them. Jonathan turns to her and asks if she still wants to do this, and she says, quote, "Let's burn this lab to the ground." Dustin returns home to check on Dart, but sees that he has broken the tank. There's glass everywhere with this gross slime on it. He then sees a trail of blood, and when he follows it, he's shocked to see Dart eating his pet cat. Dart turns and screeches, and now we can clearly see that Dart is a Demogorgon. Dustin got himself in some shit, and he should have listened to his friends. In the last scene, we see Hopper, who after he left Joyce's house has gone to the field where all the rotten crops are and starts digging this huge hole. He gets to a certain point where he hits this gooey slime that starts hissing like it's alive, but he keeps going anyway, and he opens up the hole enough for him to crawl inside of it. I don't know why he would do this, but when he jumps down, he finds himself in the tunnel that is very similar to the Upside Down. We see the ash in the air, and he literally mumbles, "Oh Jesus," and the episode ends. We're going right into one of my personal favorite episodes of the season called Digged Up. The episode begins with Joyce trying to call Hopper. He isn't answering. Obviously, we know that he's down in the tunnel, but she doesn't know that yet. While she waits for his call back, she's still trying to connect all the pictures that Will is drawing and make some sense of it. While she's doing that, Mike has come to visit Will. Will starts telling him that he feels it inside of him and how he sees whatever the shadow monster is seeing. The more the monster spreads around Hawkins, the more connected to it he feels. Mike was trying to make him feel better, telling him it's actually pretty cool and that he's now like a super spy who's able to spy on the shadow monster, and that maybe Will's connection to him could be how they find a way to stop it. But Will definitely doesn't see it that way. We shift to Hopper in the tunnels. He's surrounded by the creepy, pulsating vines that look straight out of the Upside Down. He hears a screech and he pulls out his gun. I don't think that would really help him, but he's trying. He follows the sound and looks up and sees this. What the F is that? It hisses and shoots something out at him. He starts to cough. He gets all disoriented and he falls to the ground. And remember, at this point, nobody knows where he is. Will pops up from a dream and rushes to his mom to tell her that he saw Hopper and that he thinks Hopper's in trouble and that he's going to die soon. It cuts right back to Hopper waking up in the tunnels, gasping for air. He starts to throw up this black, thick substance, so gross. He struggles to get back up on his feet, but he manages and begins to walk back where he came from, but quickly realizes the tunnels that are very much alive have shifted and closed off his pathway. Covering his nose, trying not to breathe in any more spores, he tries to find another way out. Dustin, who's lying to basically everyone he loves, pretends to be on the phone with a neighbor who says that they saw their pet cat wandering the neighborhood. His mom is so upset about their cat being lost, and obviously he can't tell her that the cat has been eaten by a demogorgon, so he says that it ran away so that she would go searching while he waits at home. After she leaves, he puts on all this padding, which is so funny to me. He sets up a trail of what I'm guessing is candy on the floor for Dart to follow that leads all the way outside down into the cellar. Dustin waits in the garage, still in his full gear, waiting for Dart to follow the trail and go down the cellar. We see through a hole in the garage Dart is following the trail. Dustin starts whispering to himself a little too loud. Dart hears him and turns right around. Dustin now is terrified, so he jumps out the garage, attacking him with the hockey stick, and hits Dart right into the cellar, closing the door behind him. 11 hitches a ride to go find her mom by using the letters Hopper had in the box. When she arrives, we finally see the heartbreaking story of what happened to Terry. She's basically being trapped in her mind after being experimented on by Dr. Brenner. Using her powers, 11 connects physically with her mom and gets flashes of a baby being taken away, electricity, and the words breathe, sunflower, and rainbow. It's her first real glimpse at her own past, and it changes everything for her. In this next scene, we're finally introduced to Murray, who becomes a big and iconic character on the show. Nancy and Jonathan go to see him for help bringing down Hawkins' lab. He's a big conspiracy theorist and wants to help them, especially for covering up Barb's death. With everything he has and their tape recording, they ask if it's enough to bring down the lab, but unfortunately, he thinks that nobody will believe them because it all sounds a little insane. But if they water it down, people may actually listen to what they're saying. So that's their plan right now. Back at the Byers' house, Will keeps drawing strange patterns that don't make sense to them until Bob. It turns out Will's drawings form an enormous map of the underground tunnels spreading beneath Hawkins. Bob, being the sweet, nerdy genius he is, figures it out and realizes it's centered near the pumpkin patches where the rot began. Joyce finally understands this is where Hopper has to be. Dustin recruits Steve for help. He asks if Steve still has his iconic nail-studded bat, and the two set out to deal with Dart. It's an unexpected friendship, but it kicks off one of the best duos in Stranger Things history. Lucas and Max meet up at the arcade. Lucas, who we now see has a little bit of a crush on Max, decides to open up and finally tell her the truth about what happened to Will, but of course she doesn't believe him. She thinks he made up this whole elaborate story to impress her. He ends up getting really upset, saying that he's risking his life to tell her this, and she just keeps making fun of him and walks away. Joyce, Bob, Will, and Mike follow Will's map, and sure enough, they find Hopper trapped deep in the tunnels, tangled in vines. It's tense, but they manage to free him just in time. However, as they're tearing apart the vines, Will suddenly collapses in pain. His connection to the Upside Down is growing, and it's clear the shadow monster's hold on him is getting stronger. Again, the episode ends not so great for Will. Episode 6, The Spy. This one starts so intense. We open immediately after the events of episode 5. Will is convulsing and screaming after the shadow monster invaded his body. Dr. Owens and his team rush him into the Hawkins lab medical area while Joyce panics. It's honestly so scary. Owens tells Joyce that Will's body temperature is dangerously low. His body wants the cold. Cut to Dustin and Steve, a totally different vibe. They're teaming up after Dustin confessed he was hiding a strange pet, Dart, who's now grown into a small demogorgon and escaped. He brings Steve to the cellar, and all Steve finds is that same goo Dustin found the other episode on the tank. It's clearly his shedding. They find a huge hole in the wall that leads out of the cellar. Dart has escaped again. We get this quick little scene of some unknown men in suits coming into the Byers' home and taking photos of Will's drawings. Joyce is speaking to the team at Hawkins' lab and describing Will's recent symptoms. She's angry at Dr. Owens for not listening sooner. She's demanding he's transferred to a real hospital, but they say that's not possible. Meanwhile, Nancy, Jonathan, and Murray are mailing out the recording of Dr. Owens in the lab to all the main news outlets. They toast to "taking down the man." Murray lets them stay the night since they're drinking. He's responsible, guys. They start the night in separate rooms, but they end up meeting up in the middle of the night, wink wink, and they share their first kiss and go to bed together. Ugh, poor Steve. Hopper is being held at Hawkins' lab as well because he could possibly be contaminated after being down in the tunnels and breathing in those spores for so long. We saw in last episode he was throwing up the black bile, so it makes sense. They put him in this suit and send him down to show him the root of where all the vines are coming from. You know, the thing that's been rotting all the crops and Hopper's been looking into. He asks why they aren't burning it, and Dr. Owen says there's a complication. When they do, Will feels it. Will wakes up in the hospital, seems very confused, and doesn't remember Bob, Dr. Owens, Hopper, or even what hospital he's in. Will turns to Dr. Owens and says, "They hurt me," referring to his team burning away the vines, which we now know is connected to the Upside Down and to Will. Will threatens them, saying they shouldn't have done that, he doesn't like that, meaning the Shadow Monster. Dr. Owens tells Joyce and Hopper that the monster is using Will as a spy to see what the humans are doing. Joyce is worried Will won't remember who he is anymore and will be completely gone soon. Dustin asks Lucas to help capture Dart in the woods with him and Steve, so of course he has to get his girl Max, just to prove to her what he told her the other day was true. She has to sneak out though, because remember, she has a scary older brother Billy who doesn't want her talking to the boys anymore. Dustin and Steve head into the woods waiting for Max and Lucas. They start by using raw meat as bait for Dart. Dustin asks Steve for some advice on girls, and this is where their brotherly bond begins to form. Hopper, who we know has been stuck in Hawkins' lab since he was found in the tunnels, is using his walkie-talkie to try to get in touch with Eleven back at the cabin. He apologizes, telling her he's not mad at her about their fight, he just wants to protect her. Little does he know she's not even there and that she's gone to see her mother. Back at the lab, Dr. Owens and his team are looking at Will's brain scans. They're comparing last week to yesterday to 1 hour ago. Clearly, whatever's happening to Will is only getting worse, and none of them have any suggestions on how to help him. The rest of the team thinks that they should keep burning away the vines and tunnels that have spread, even if it means it kills Will. But Dr. Owens is completely against it, but they all think that at this rate it's spreading, Will is gone by the end of the day. Back to Will at the hospital, he suddenly has this epiphany that he knows exactly how to stop the shadow monster. They spread out all of his drawings on the table in front of him, and he points out a specific spot that he says he knows the shadow monster doesn't want him to go to. Dr. Owens' team, of course, gears up, and they head right to that spot. At the same time, Dustin, Lucas, Max, and Steve are setting up a trap in the woods for Dart. They hide out till dark, waiting for him to take the bait. As Lucas and Max sit on lookout, they have this little moment where she opens up about her life. She reveals her parents are divorced, and how her life is so much worse now because her stepbrother Billy is awful. We know that. In this moment, we also see that Max may be starting to like Lucas now, too. So cute. They finally see Dart, but he's not taking their bait, so of course Steve decides to fight it himself. Gotta love Steve, but man, this was a bad idea. He has his nail bat, and we see Dart, who's grown a lot. He's terrifying. Another Demogorgon starts creeping up behind Steve. Lucas screams out for warning. At this point, I had the chills. It was so crazy. Steve makes a run for the school bus that they're hiding in. One of the Demogorgons gets in, and Steve starts bashing it with his bat. Dustin's calling for help on the walkie-talkie, but nobody's responding. One of the Demogorgons makes his way to the top of the bus. Steve goes to hit it with his bat, but right as he's about to, we hear a screech from a distance, and the Demogorgons run away. Pan back to Dr. Owen's team. They followed Will's directions into the tunnels, but it was a trap. The demo dogs attack the team. Dr. Owens loses contact with them and realizes they've been deceived. The monster used Will to lead these men to their deaths. Hence, the name of the episode, The Spy. Will starts saying sorry and that it made him do it. He then warns his mother that she should leave because they're almost there. Will is uncontrollably leading the Demogorgons right to Hawkins' lab. The episode ends just upon their arrival. This episode, The Lost Sister, is not my favorite. I'm sure a lot of you agree, but let's break it down because there's some important stuff in here. It kicks off where we left 11 2 episodes ago. Quick flashes pop up of what she saw when she used her powers last and found out what happened to her mother, Terry. She sees the Rainbow Room, the experiments, her mom's paralyzed state, and another little girl. Elle believes her mom wants her to find this girl. Since Terry can no longer speak, she is communicating with Elle telepathically. Elle and Terry's caretaker, who we learn is Terry's sister Becky, go through Terry's things from Hawkins' lab to hopefully find something about who this girl is. She finds a paper stating that the young girl they're looking for vanished from London years ago. Using her nosebleed-inducing telepathy, holding the photograph, Elle tries to find her and ends up seeing the girl we saw in episode 1. With the number 008 tattooed on her, just like 11, she leaves immediately to go after her. Cut to Elle on a Greyhound, headed to Illinois. She uses her powers again and gets these quick flashes of the girl's location. When she arrives, she's wandering the streets till eventually she stumbles into a sketchy warehouse hideout, and boom, there they are, the masked gang we saw in episode 1 and the girl, who we find out is named Callie. Now we know Elle can't really talk that good. All she can say at first is that she saw Callie in the Rainbow Room and that she's her sister. Callie sees her tattoo, they hug, so sweet, nothing bonds you like having shared trauma. They open up to each other about the nightmares of Hawkins' lab. Callie shows off her gift a bit, showing it can be beautiful too. In this kind of emotional scene later that night, Callie tells Eleven she thinks Terry sent her there for a reason, that they belong together. They are each other's home. I don't like the vibes I get from this convo, honestly. She's definitely trying to get Elle to not return back to Hawkins. Elle uses her powers to visit the cabin, and she hears Hopper's call that we saw last episode, where he was apologizing about their fight and saying he will be home soon, but she's rudely awoken by Callie, who forces her downstairs to speak with her crew and tell her their next plan. They show her all these IDs of the people they killed because they somehow caused them to be in the situation they're in. We see a flashback of episode 1 when we saw them fleeing the scene, but we didn't know what they did. We now know that they went to this guy's house and killed him. I guess to give her some sort of test, Callie brings Elle to this train and tells her to push it towards them, to use her anger, to channel the rage from the lab, of isolation, of all the trauma, and Elle begins to see these flashes of very painful memories, but she's actually able to do it. Callie shows Elle their wall of targets, more people they want to find and kill for causing them harm. They ask if Elle recognizes anyone on it from Hawkins' lab maybe. She actually does. The guy she saw in the visions of her mother being electrocuted. Callie reveals he also tortured her as a child, so that's their next victim. Elle uses her powers again to track him down. She's able to find him. They come up with a plan and they head out. So of course they give Elle this crazy look and they all walk out thinking they look badass, but I think it's hilarious. They stop at a gas station and distract the owner while they rob the place. It's clear Elle is uncomfortable doing it, but finally feeling like she fits in somewhere, she grabs the Eggos. The owner catches them and pulls a gun on them. Elle, with no hesitation, throws him across the store. Is she as innocent as we think she is? We hear sirens in the distance and they make a run for it. After their failed robbery attempt, they show up at their target's home. Elle uses her powers again to see what he's doing inside, making sure that he's alone. Thinking he's just watching TV by himself, they mask up and head in. They successfully break into his home, find out his name is Ray. The others begin to go through his house and are just stealing all his stuff, but Eleven and Callie unmask themselves and ask him if he remembers them. He says no until Callie uses her powers to make him see them as children again, and suddenly his memories return. Eleven begins to just throw him around the room and they fuck him up. To save his life, he offers to help them find Brenner, who Elle believed was dead. Ray is claiming he's still alive. Being influenced by Callie, Elle begins to strangle him to death despite what he says. She then sees a photo of him with 2 young girls and stops. Right as the rest of the crew find the 2 girls hiding in their bedroom calling the police. Elle doesn't want to go through with this anymore. Callie begins to yell at her. She pulls out a gun to finish the job, but Elle uses her powers to throw it out the window. Their moral compasses are clashing. Back at the warehouse, Callie and Elle are having a conversation where Callie says she remembers the day Elle didn't come to the Rainbow Room anymore, and that is what gave her the courage to escape Hawkins' lab, and she ran away as far as she could. She decided then to use her gifts to get revenge on those who hurt them. She gives Elle the chance to stay with them and fight, or go back to Hawkins and hide. Attempting to give her the rage to fight and find Brenner, Callie makes Elle see him, which causes her to cry and emotionally break down. I actually think this is really cruel, and I was proud of Elle when she screams at her to get out of her head. Elle, who's in her feels now, is holding Hopper's shirt and when she uses her powers to see him to check on him. Finding him at Hawkins' lab, she senses the danger they're in back home. Right at the same time, the cops bust into the warehouse. Luckily, Callie is able to use her powers to make the cops see an empty room. They head to the van to escape the second the cops walk away, but Elle decides to not go with them. Callie fights her on her choice, saying that people back at Hawkins can't save her, to which Elle responds, "No, but I can save them." Episode ends with Elle right back where she was in the beginning of this episode, on a Greyhound, heading back to Hawkins. Episode 8, The Mind Flayer, the most heartbreaking episode in my opinion. Let's get into it. In this insanely intense opening scene, the Demodogs have arrived at Hawkins' lab, killing everyone in their path. Mike thinks they should put Will to sleep because he is the spy. If Will knows where they are, then the shadow monster knows where they are. Joyce hesitates at first, but ultimately realizes Will isn't himself, so they go through with it and put him right to sleep. Just then, Hopper and Dr. Owens arrive after being chased by the Demodogs and move them to another, safer room. We also see all the employees of Hawkins' lab being killed left and right. It's crazy. They head to the security room, which is actually smart because now they're able to watch the Demodogs on all the security cams and see where they are, but then all the power goes out. Cut to Steve, Max, Lucas, and Dustin, who barely survived the fight with Dart and the other Demodog 2 episodes ago. Lucas and Dustin are arguing over the fact Dustin lied to the gang about keeping Dart, putting them all in danger, yada yada yada. Steve hears loud roaring coming from the lab, and they head towards it. Back at the lab, everyone is dead besides the main crew. Someone needs to reset the breakers. They realize the security system's down, meaning all doors are locked. Bob, being the tech guy he is, volunteers to reboot the system while Dr. Owens guides him through the maze-like halls. Finally, Nancy and Jonathan arrive at Hawkins' lab after being on their little honeymoon. They quickly realize something isn't right. Obviously, they see the power is out. Just as they arrive, out pop Steve, Dustin, Max, and Lucas, and they're all reunited for the first time in episodes. Bob makes it to the power switch and turns on all the lights successfully and opens all the doors. He tells everyone to go and not wait for him. Get the kids out. At the same time, now that the power is back, the gang on the outside opens the gates and they're heading in. One group's trying to get out, one group wants to get in. It's madness. Dr. Owen stays back to guide them out with the cameras, bless his heart. Hopper and Joyce get Mike and Will to the exit, Will being still unconscious, carried by Hopper. Joyce hesitates at the door, waiting for Bob. Bob's making his way out slowly with the guidance of Dr. Owens. He has a clear shot out, until he doesn't. He knocks something over, drawing a demo dog's attention towards him. He makes it to the door where Joyce was still waiting. They smile at each other for just a minute before a demo dog jumps on him and, unfortunately, kills him. I hate recording that. Joyce is being forced to watch him die. Hopper runs back in with a gun, but at that point, a bunch of other demo dogs jump out and they have no choice but to run and leave him behind. Hopper has to drag frantic Joyce out of the lab. Guys, I can't explain how devastating this is to watch, and also explain, I loved Bob. This was brutal. Even rewatching it back, it broke my heart. On the bright side, the rest of the gang escapes safely. In the aftermath, back at the Byers house, Hopper tries to call military backup to Hawkins' lab, but nobody believes him, of course. Joyce is a mess, locked up in her room. Everyone's feeling super defeated. Mike, though, says they can't let Bob die in vain. He still wants to fight. They come to the realization, which I think we've all known this whole entire time, is that everything is connected. Will, the tunnels, the Demogorgons, it's a hive mind. This is where they give it the name Mind Flayer. They'll use Will to find out how to defeat him. The Mind Flayer knows everything Will knows, so to fight back, they decide to keep Will in the dark, literally. They cover the windows and every inch of their garage to make it unrecognizable to Will. They tie him up and try to communicate with real Will. He wakes up and starts freaking out, screaming over and over again, "Why am I tied up?" in a very demonic voice. Obviously, the Mind Flayer's in control. To try to bring out real Will, Joyce, Charlie, and Mike begin telling him things about himself, like his birthday, the things he likes, stories from their childhood. Mike recalls the day they met and became friends. We can see Will fighting the monster inside of him. Hopper then notices he's doing Morse code with his fingers. They figure out he is saying here. Shit gets crazy here. He keeps tapping out Morse code and he ends up spelling out close gate. Before they even have a chance to figure out what he means, the phone rings in the house and Will hears it. Now he knows where he is, which means the Mind Flayer knows where they are. Immediately his body starts to shake. They hear roars outside. The demo dogs are coming. They prepare to fight. Hopper and Nancy have guns at least. Everyone else is going to have to start swinging or something because they have no weapons. Lucas has this tiny-ass slingshot. Joyce and Jonathan have no weapons. I don't know what they're going to do. The demo dogs are surrounding the entire house, but then they hear something else coming. Whatever it is, throws a demo dog into the house, already dead. What the fuck? In this badass moment in closing scene, 11 walks in with her bloody nose. She wrecked those demo dogs outside. The look on Mike's face when he sees her brought tears to my eyes. Oh my god, it was so beautiful, but also so emotional. What an ending. Here we are at the season finale, The Gate. So basically I cried throughout the whole opening of this episode. It opens where we left off. Mike and the others finally reunite with 11. We see the emotional moment where Mike embraces 11, relieved she's alive. But soon the tension rises as Mike learns that Hopper secretly kept 11 hidden for nearly a year. Mike is furious. He starts hitting Hopper, filled with so many emotions, and Hopper just holds him and hugs him. Max attempts to introduce herself, but Elle swerves her and walks away. Joyce and Elle embrace each other, and Elle quickly asks to see Will. Joyce is about to tell her everything that's happened, but 11 says she already knows. She saw it. Remember last episode when Will said in Morse code, "Close the gate"? Well, they ask 11 if she's able to do that since she's done it before. She says she can, but Mike is so worried for her, telling her to please be careful, he can't lose her again. They're about to kiss, but Hopper cockblocks, so annoying. Let these kids have a moment, man. They were separated for almost a year. We shift to Will, who's obviously still possessed by the shadowy entity known as the Mind Flayer. Joyce remembers the monster hates heat, so Jonathan, Nancy, and Joyce come up with a plan to take Will to the cabin, tie him to the bed, crank up heaters, and light a fire. Basically, a makeshift exorcism. Billy shows up at the Byers house looking for Max. He's very angry, like scarily angry. He shoves Steve to the ground, storms into the house, starts throwing Lucas around. Honestly, what the fuck? He's insane, and I wouldn't be upset if he died. Steve and him start going at it again. Steve fucks him up at first, but then he starts losing pretty bad. The kids are just watching. Steve is so close to death when Max grabs the needle they use to put Will to sleep and stabs her brother with it. We get this eerie shot of all the demo dogs coming together at the gate like they know 11 is coming. This can't be good. Elle and Hopper arrive at Hawkins' lab in their attempt to close the gate. Elle's mind is then flooded with terrible memories of this place, but she's so brave and heads right in. At the cabin, Joyce, Nancy, and Jonathan have Will tied up and the heat cranked up. Will wakes up and screams, "It hurts, let me go," as they drive heat into him to force the entity out. The idea is to make his body inhospitable, so the Mind Flayer must eject. I can't imagine how heartbreaking this is for Joyce, but fueled by the intense emotions of losing Bob and trying not to lose her son, she turns the heat up higher. While that's happening, the kids, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Max, and surprisingly Steve, even though he got the shit beaten out of him and his face is busted, enter the underground tunnels leading toward the gate to distract and draw away the demo dogs from 11. Making their way to the gate between our world and the Upside Down, Hopper finds and helps a wounded Dr. Owens, who is honestly in shock to see that 11 is still alive. Will at the cabin is still convulsing in pain. Jonathan urges Joyce to stop, that it's killing him, until they see this. These black veins moving up his neck. Will manages to get a hand free and begins to strangle Joyce. At the same time, the crew in the tunnels ignite gasoline to lure the creatures away from the lab. The tunnels begin to burn away, which causes Will to let go of his mother, and the monster leaves as a smoke cloud exits his mouth and flies off. Will wakes up and seems to be his normal self. The demo dogs run from the gate to head towards the fire, clearing the way for 11 and Hopper. Now that Will is free of the Mind Flayer, Jonathan tells Hopper over walkie-talkie it's time to close the gate. Hopper and 11 ride the elevator down to the pit with a shimmering portal. As the gang in the tunnels tries to escape, they run into a demo dog. Dustin recognizes him though. It's Dart. He has a moment with him, offers him some chocolate, and Dart lets them go. They're able to exit the tunnels safely. As they reach the gate, 11 taps into her powers. She remembers advice from Callie to channel anger. She thinks back on Brenner's abuse and her time at the lab. With that emotional energy, she unleashes her powers. Demo dogs come out, Hopper fires to hold them off. 11 levitates, screaming and using every ounce of power she has. Finally, she closes the gate, the portal snaps shut, the monster army collapses, the immediate threat ends, 11 and Hopper embrace. After all the action's done, the show wraps up with some quieter scenes. 1 month later, the lab is shut down. Justice has been served for Barb's family. Hawkins' lab is exposed for being the cause of Barb's death. Hopper and Dr. Owens meet up at a diner. Owens gives Hopper a valid birth certificate for 11, aka Jane. The kids attend the snowball dance. Dustin, after being rejected by girls, is pulled into a dance with Nancy. Mike and 11 finally share a kiss, and so do Lucas and Max. But beneath the happy exterior is some unease. The final shot shows the upside-down version of Hawkins Middle School and the Mind Flayer looming, so even in victory, there's a threat left.
Episode 1 is titled, Susie, Do You Copy? This season kicks off not in Hawkins, but deep inside a secret Soviet laboratory in June of 1984. Scientists are working on a massive machine to crack open a gate to the Upside Down, but the experiment ends in disaster. The portal collapses, killing workers, and setting the stage for a Russian subplot with a to the Cold War rivalry between the US of A and the Soviet Union. Even the actor that's playing the Russian general looks like Mikhail Gorbachev from the 1980s. So now, fast forward to the summer of 1985 in Hawkins. Dustin returns from science camp showing off his new inventions, a nod to Data from the Goonies, and his new invention includes the latest project, a homemade ham radio tower that he calls Cerebro. His plan is to use it to contact his new long-distance girlfriend, Susie, who lives in Utah. While his friends are hella skeptical that he has a girlfriend, this subplot sets up both comic relief and a key plot device later in the season. Meanwhile, Mike and 11 are in full teenage romance mode, kissing and constantly at Hopper's cabin. Hopper is hilariously frustrated in this, leading to one of the season's running gags, Dad Hopper trying and failing to keep control. Meanwhile, across town, Joyce notices something strange. The magnets on her fridge keep falling off. It seems like something small at first, but her curiosity, of course, leads her down the path toward uncovering a much larger mystery for this season. We also see Jonathan Byers and Nancy Wheeler still in a relationship and working for the Hawkins Post. Nancy is trying to be taken serious as a female journalist, as her talents are being wasted as she's just a gopher for the male journalists in the office. Billy, meanwhile, continues his role as Hawkins' bad boy lifeguard at the local pool. His arrogance and interactions with the moms at the pool, particularly Mrs. Wheeler, give us the show's cheeky nod to the 80s, teen sex comedies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and even shows us a life-size cutout of Phoebe Cates, who starred in the 1980s classic. But Billy's storyline takes a dark turn on his way to meet Mrs. Wheeler for an affair that never happens. His car crashes near the abandoned steel mill. There, he's attacked and dragged inside the steel mill by the Mind Flayer, a nod to the Evil Dead, marking the beginning of his possession arc that will actually dominate the entire season. Next, we see the town's new cultural centerpiece, the Starcourt Mall. This shiny new shopping complex has quickly become the hangout spot for Hawkins' youth. With neon lights, bustling shops, and a food court, it's a time capsule of 1980s mall culture. This mall isn't just a nostalgic set piece. It represents the changing world. The small local shops like Joyce's hardware store are struggling to survive. It's a clear nod to how malls were reshaping American consumer culture in the 1980s. Hopper, meanwhile, struggles with Mike and Eleven's relationship. After seeking advice from Joyce, he decides to have the talk with Mike. But instead of sensitivity like he practiced with Joyce, Hopper channels Magnum PI vibes and completely intimidates Mike into backing off and not spending so much time with Elle. Lastly, we see Dustin on the hill all alone, still trying to get in touch with Susie through Cerebro. But instead, he intercepts a secret Russian message. Episode 2 is titled The Mallrats. Episode 2 fully establishes the Starcourt Mall as Hawkins' new cultural hub. From the bright neon signs to the bustling food court, it's a slice of 1985 suburban America. The Scoops Ahoy ice cream shop becomes a centerpiece here, with Steve Harrington now working behind the counter in full sailor uniform. Robin, his quick-witted coworker, makes her debut. Their sarcastic banter sets up for one of the season's most beloved friendships. Meanwhile, Elle and Max team up for a girl power moment after Mike lies about being busy. Max convinces Elle that she doesn't need to revolve her life around boys. Instead, they go on a shopping spree at the mall. The sequence is backed by Material Girl by Madonna, a perfect cultural drop that cements the show's 80s vibe. This episode also digs deeper into Billy's possession arc. While working at the pool, Billy fights to maintain control, but the Mind Flayer's grip tightens. Later, he kidnaps his coworker, Heather Holloway, the daughter of Tom Holloway, the editor-in-chief of the Hawkins Post, luring her into the steel mill where she becomes another host for the Mind Flayer. This sets up the chilling Flared storyline. On the investigation side, Nancy and Jonathan stumble into their own little mystery. At the Hawkins Post, Nancy pitches a story about diseased rats in town. Her male colleagues dismiss her, mocking her as Nancy Drew from the Nancy Drew books. This 80s sexism of the good old boys club of the male journalists at the newsroom is both a cultural callback and a setup for Nancy's subplot to prove herself as a journalist. When Nancy and Jonathan arrive at the Driscoll farm, they are led by Mrs. Driscoll to the basement, where they find that rats have been eating the fertilizer. They're attracted to the chemicals. Nancy investigates by calling other neighboring farms to find out if other animals have been eating any of the fertilizer, while Jonathan tries to take a photograph of the rat that Mrs. Driscoll captured. Hopper, still all hopped up on those Magnum PI vibes, visits Joyce at the hardware store, all victorious that Mike and Elle will not be hanging out today. Hopper invites Joyce out to Enzo's at 7 p.m. for a not a dinner date, a line that'll come back in the season's finale. After Joyce agrees to meet at Enzo's at 7, Hopper, before leaving, notices that the magnets have fallen off. After he leaves, he gets a new Magnum PI Hawaiian shirt and runs to town hall. At the mayor's office, there's a huge protest about the mall opening versus the downtown local businesses closing, and about Mayor Klein being corrupt. We also see Joyce begin research into magnetism, even going to the kid's science teacher, Mr. Scott Clark. At the same time, there's some strange Russian activity that's beginning to surface. Dustin visits Steve at the Scoops Ahoy shop at the mall and tells him about the secret Russian message that he intercepted and recorded. With a Russian-English dictionary in hand, Dustin, Steve, and Robin, who has little geniuses for ears, begin to decipher and translate the message. Hopper also encounters his own mysterious Terminator-like assassin at the town hall, who seems to be connected to the secret operations beneath Hawkins. His presence is a direct nod to Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator in 1984, foreshadowing the militarized subplot. We later see Hopper bump into him at Enzo's when Joy stands him up, foreshadowing their showdown later this season. Episode 3, The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. Episode 3 tightens the suspense as our characters begin to uncover the truth about Billy's possession. Elle and Max, still bonding, decide to use Eleven's powers for some spy fun the night before. What happens is harmless gossip checking in on Mike and Lucas quickly takes a darker turn when they they see Billy with Heather. They suspect something is wrong and head out to investigate the next morning. At Billy's house, Elle finds blood on the bathroom cabinet and a lifeguard fanny pack and a bloody whistle underneath it. They go to the pool and they find out that both Heather and Billy did not show up for work. In the empty locker room, Max and Elle set up to find Heather using her powers. Elle finds Heather in an ice bath and she's screaming for help as she is dragged under the water with Elle desperately trying to grab at her but can't reach her. The boys also have a sleepover and Mike and Lucas wake to Will in full costume demanding that they call him by his full name, Will the Wise. And he has this game board all set up and he's beginning to tell the lore to play his new Dungeons and Dragon campaign. Lucas and Mike are just still so caught up in this breakup from the day before at the mall that they make Will feel completely left out and clearly rush through playing the game. Lucas and Mike are so caught up in Max and Elle to play the game, Will doesn't understand. This heartbreaking moment shows that some of the boys are growing up, moving on to girls, and leaving these childhood games behind. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan chase their rat lead. With Nancy acting like Nancy Drew, they go back to interview Mrs. Driscoll, and with a twist, they find her in the basement eating fertilizer. Mrs. Driscoll looks up with these crazed-like eyes, just like the rat did in the cage. Back at Scoops Ahoy, the Scoops troops begins their first real detective work. Steve and Dustin use binoculars to look for evil Russian spies around the mall. After hearing the music from the Indian Flyer mechanical horse last episode, they are convinced that there are evil Russian spies in Hawkins. Robin continues to piece together the intercepted Russian transmissions. The code-breaking scenes provide comic relief while also giving a cool nod to the Cold War spy paranoia. Robin actually cracks part of the code, which were code names for several different food eateries. One delivery company, Lynx, has a silver cat logo which has a similar resemblance to the Thundercats, and they realize that the Russians are actually operating in Hawkins itself. Meanwhile, Joyce visits Hopper, completely forgetting about their not-a-date dinner at Enzo's. Watching frustrated Hopper while Joyce tries to talk to him about magnets is like watching this old couple bicker. It's hysterical. Joyce grabs a few supplies and tells Hopper she is leaving to investigate. Hopper and Joyce face consequences from the last season when they return to the facility where Bob died. Their suspicions about the Russians grow stronger as they both cope with their trauma and guilt as they explore the facility. Hopper pleading with Joyce that he just wants her and her family to feel safe. And here's where we get the big reveal when Hopper asks Joyce if she's moving. And she confirms that she's having the house fixed up to put it up for sale because she wants to move out of Hawkins for a fresh start. But she hasn't told the kids yet. Suddenly, they hear a noise, and Hopper goes to investigate. Getting the jump on Hopper, the Russian Terminator beats him up and takes off on a motorcycle, leaving Joyce to find Hopper bleeding on the floor. Jumping back to Max and Elle, they show up at the Holloway house, and to their surprise, they find Billy and Heather having dinner with her parents, and they're perfectly fine. Elle and Max leave confused, but Elle is convinced that something is wrong. Even though Heather is revealed to be alive after Max and Elle leave, we see that she is under Billy's control. She actually drugs her parents and they become the next victims, dragged into the growing web of the Mind Flayer. The heart-crushing moment in this episode is when Will leaves Mike after arguing about their friendship versus Mike having a girlfriend. Will rides off and goes alone to his fort, Castle Byers, in the woods. He tears it down as he's sobbing and crying, which is so heartbreaking, and in his anger and despair, Will feels that little tingle in the back of his neck, signifying the Mind Flayer's return. Mike and Lucas pull up and Will tells them it's back. Episode 4 is titled The Sauna Test. Episode 4 is where this season really takes its first big jump into action horror, escalating the tension from uneasy mystery to full-blown monster terror. It opens with the kids realizing that Billy's possessed. Elle, Max, Mike, and Lucas piece together clues: his erratic behavior, this unexplained disappearances, and Heather's suspicious absence. Their plan is to trap Billy in the pool's sauna, crank up the heat, and force whatever's inside him to reveal itself. The scene cuts away to show the Holloway parents tied up in the basement of the steel mill. They beg Heather to stop this, and she says, "There is no stopping it, Daddy," in a creepy ass way. And then Billy tells Janet, like he told Heather before, try not to move. Seeing the reaction of Tom and Janet Holloway makes this scene so terrifying as we get the Mind Flayer stepping up. Here we get the first real shot of the growing Mind Flayer in action, shooting out two tendrils that cover the Holloway's mouths and does what it does and takes over their bodies. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan watch on as EMTs restrain restrain Mrs. Driscoll after they find her eating chemicals. Mrs. Driscoll is restrained but hysterical, screaming about the chemicals. I have to go back. I have to go back. This subplot adds to a sense of dread because now regular townsfolk are becoming vessels for the Mind Flayer. Back at Scoops Ahoy, the group that we're now calling the Scoops Troop, Steve, Robin, and Dustin, well, they have to convince Erica so they can make their move by promising her ice cream for life. Together, these four make a really bold move after cracking that Russian code. Erica actually has to crawl through the vents of the mall in order to find this secret Russian storage room. Robin, Steve, and Dustin are actually on the roof of the mall using those binoculars again, watching and waiting, while Robin uses a walkie to guide Erica through the vent system. Erica makes it and unlocks the door so they can sneak into the room. Thinking it leads to smuggled goods, they step inside. Steve discovers a mysterious green liquid in a tube, a nod to John Carpenter's 1987 Prince of Darkness. But to their surprise, they realize the room is actually an elevator shaft. Suddenly, the elevator plunges, taking them deep beneath the Starcourt Mall. Whoa. This discovery confirms the Russians have a huge, massive secret operation right underneath the Starcourt Mall in Hawkins. Flip back to the adult side of things, Hopper and Joyce confront Mayor Klein. After noticing suspicious land deals, they suspect corruption. Hopper corners Klein at his office, intimidating him with that classic Hopper mix of brute force and gruff charm. Klein reveals that he's been selling property to shady buyers connected to Starcourt, hinting at the Russian base. They go to Klein's house to get those records, and once they get the records, they leave Klein tied up in his house, and Joyce, using her detective skills, starts to figure out that those properties are connected to her demagnetized magnets, and they leave to search the different properties listed in those records. Joyce believes there has to be a machine on one of those properties causing an unstable electromagnetic field that's making her magnets fall, and it's all connected to the Russians buying up all that land. The climax of the episode comes when Elle, Max, Mike, Will, and Lucas confront Billy at the pool. His aggression and strange behavior confirm that he's not himself. But the highlight of this episode is the actual sauna test. The kids lower Billy into the sauna, locking him inside as the heat rises. At first, he taunts them, trying to mask that he's possessed, but soon his skin begins to blister and the heat and his strength, oh my god, he turns into like superhuman guy and his eyes go dark. The mind flare inside him lashes out violently, breaking out of the sauna room and attacking the kids. The sequence is pure 80s horror energy, reminiscent of The Thing and Nightmare on Elm Street. At the same time Billy is activated in the sauna test, Mrs. Driscoll awakens at the hospital just as Nancy Wheeler, goes undercover as her granddaughter, Nancy Driscoll. Too many Nancy last names. Mrs. Driscoll's eyes are also black and her skin has those black veins and black sores just like Billy's. Speaking of Billy, the kids are still fighting him at the pool. It takes all their strength plus 11's telekinetic power to fend him off. Billy takes off, runs away, leaving the kids shaken up but certain of one thing. The Mind Flayer has returned to Hawkins, and it's using human hosts. Episode 5 is titled The Flayed. We open with Nancy calling Jonathan early in the morning to tell him that she continued the investigation at the hospital and all about Mrs. Driscoll. She's piecing together clues and asks about Will. Is he safe? Their next mission, they need to find their brothers Mike and Will to warn them. Somewhere in the woods, Hopper's truck is broken down after the shootout with the Russian Terminator guy from last episode. Joyce is trying to communicate with the captured Russian scientist Alexei. Hopper tries to fix the car, but it blows up, leaving this huge-ass cloud of smoke. As they walk through the woods, they bicker like an old married couple, continuing this comedic banter from earlier episodes. Alexei makes a run for it, but stops when he finds a 7-Eleven, a classic 80s iconic mart. Little do they know, though, that the Russian Terminator is hot on their trail. At the 7-Eleven, Hopper, Joyce, and Alexei pause to have a refreshing drink and get some snacks. Hopper gets Joyce to play along with him as detectives as they commandeer a hot yellow convertible. They take off, and not too long after, the Russian shows up at the 7-Eleven. With his brute force, he learns that Hopper, Joyce, and Alexei have stolen a car and which direction they went in. Back at the Wheelers, all of the kids are together and Eleven is using her powers to go into the void to find Hopper, which isn't very helpful since he's walking through the woods at this point. Just then, Nancy and Jonathan open the basement door and unite with the kids for the very first time this season, embracing the full Nancy Drew detective persona. Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids all share their information, and piece by piece, they figure out that the townspeople have been flayed. The last clue Eleven drops is Heather, and Nancy pieces together that it's Heather Holloway, Tom Holloway's daughter. Their next mission is to get to the Holloway house. Meanwhile, the Scoops troop is still trapped beneath the mall. They're able to break out of the room when some some Russians open the door to get some boxes. They use that unknown green liquid container to hold the door open as they each slide under. The door crushes the container and that green liquid smashes over and it starts to eat away at the metal like alien blood or acid. As they explore the Russian base, they walk and walk and walk, and the underground facility is massive. They finally stumble upon armed guards, advanced tech, and secret hallways that confirm Hawkins has been infiltrated by a huge Russian massive operation. They find the control room and sneak in. The kids' mixture of fear and humor keeps the tension balanced. Erica in particular shines with her sass and overconfidence, almost getting caught because there's someone in there. Steve has this huge fight scene where he actually wins. Yeah, he actually wins a fight because he's like 0-3 right now. Well, anyway, now that they're alone with the knocked out guard in the control room, they notice what's on the other side of the windows, the machine, and it's blasting its hair into the upside down, or maybe it's Dimension X. Anyway, back at the Holloway house, Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids look for clues, and like detectives, they were able to figure out exactly what happened to Tom, Janet, and Heather Holloway. They figure out that they have to be somewhere. There has to be a source somewhere where all the flayed are gathered. Will gets this idea to break Mrs. Driscoll out of the hospital restraints and let her lead them to the other flayed. So their next stop, get to the hospital. Hopper and Joyce connect with Murray Bauman. You remember, the eccentric conspiracy theorist journalist from season 2. Paranoid and armed with a shotgun, Murray lets them into his bunker-like home with surveillance and all that. Now pulling up to the hospital, Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids head inside, and they try to go straight to Mrs. Driscoll's room, but they are stopped and told only 2 visitors at a time, separating Nancy and Jonathan, who go up a couple floors to Mrs. Driscoll, and the kids wait downstairs in the lobby. While they wait, all the kids make up. Max, Lucas, Mike, and 11, and Will's cool with all of it. When Nancy and Jonathan go a few floors up to Mrs. Driscoll's room, she's gone. The lights start to flicker. You know, the Stranger Things signal that the Mind Flayer is there. A flayed Tom Holloway comes into the door frame, bloody and ready to take Nancy to be flayed. Jonathan fights him off, only for them to run into the hallway to find a flayed Bruce waiting for them. You remember the sexist journalist that ridicules Nancy Drew? Scared shitless, they take off running, like full-ass sprinting to escape and hide from Tom and Bruce, running past dead patients. We see Bruce walking to chase them as they sprint. A nod to the 80s supernatural undead monsters like Mike Myers and Jason Voorhees. Bruce catches up to them, breaking and popping his head through a small window in the door, a nod to the infamous "Here's Johnny" scene from the cult classic The Shining. While Jonathan fights Bruce, Nancy stabs him, but Jonathan gets knocked out. Bruce goes after Nancy, and out of nowhere, Tom pops up to try to finish Jonathan off. Getting the drop on Bruce, though, and a few rooms over, Nancy takes him out with a fire extinguisher. Here we find out that the flayed are connected because when Nancy smashes Bruce in the face, Tom's face gets smashed simultaneously, stopping him from killing Jonathan. The fight ends with both men dying. But just when you thought this was all over, Tom and Bruce's bodies convulse unnaturally, and they liquefy into this fleshy blob-like glue, just like Mrs. Driscoll's rat did a few episodes earlier. Horrifically, each fleshy blob from different rooms, they start crawling towards each other and coming together to grow and form the Mind Flayer. It's one of this season's most gruesome sequences, directly inspired from 80s body horror classics like Videodrome and Scanners. We end the episode up close and personal with a view of the Mind Flayer standing in between Nancy and Jonathan as it roars. Episode 6 is titled E Pluribus Unum. That's Latin for out of many, one. Episode 6 opens with chaos in the Russian base. The Scoops troop are staring at the machine tearing into the upside down, and they're seen by the Russian guards. Forced to run, they run through the control room towards the machine and then around the back of it to escape the Russians. Running into a room, both Steve and Robin hold the door while Erica and Dustin escape down a hatch. The Russians bust through the door and capture Steve and Robin. Picking up exactly where episode 5 left off in the hospital, we see the Mind Flayer chasing after Nancy floors above the kids. Will notices the lights flickering and gets that tingling sensation in the back of his neck and tells the other that it's here. With the Mind Flayer chasing after Nancy, she locks herself in a room and the Mind Flayer is able to liquefy, slide under the door and through the door vent, and then retake shape as the Mind Flayer. Jonathan tries to get into the room as the Mind Flayer goes after Nancy. Nancy locked in the room alone with the Mind Flayer. It gets up close and personal, ready to take her. Elle suddenly blows down the door. With her powers, she smashes the Mind Flayer left, right, up, down like a rag doll and throws it out the window. The kids run downstairs to find it outside and they watch in horror as it crawls into a drain pipe into the sewer. We see as it crawls through the sewers back to the steel mill where Billy and Heather are waiting for it, and we see it merge with a much larger Mind Flayer, and Billy ends the scene saying, "It's time." All that before the opening credits. We jump to the carnival, and Mayor Klein is meeting with the Russian Terminator guy. Klein is definitely corrupt, and he's helping the Russians to find Harper and Alexei. Switching gears to the adults, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray struggle to get Alexei to talk. Murray, who can speak Russian, helps them interrogate Alexei, who they now have nicknamed Smirnov, and who becomes comic relief by refusing to speak unless he gets a cherry Slurpee. The Slurpee gag continues with Alexei insisting he only drinks cherry flavor. Once again, using his brute force, Hopper loses it on Alexei, but he eventually gets control of the situation when he kicks Alexei out. But Alexei comes right back because he has nowhere else to go, and he knows that Russian Terminator is after him. This oddball comedy paired with the road trip in a convertible to a 4th of July fair helps to break the tension on an otherwise pretty dark episode. Now in separate rooms beneath the Starcourt Mall, Steve and Robin are being held, and they endure brutal interrogations by the Russian guards. Steve is beaten and smacked around by the Russians. When they don't get any answers because Steve isn't a spy, the Russians take the torture up a notch by drugging both him and Robin with True Serum, while Dustin and Erica scramble to free them. Meanwhile, Elle takes a bold step to figure out what the Mind Flayer is planning. Elle goes into the void and starts hunting for the source. At the same time, Nancy and Jonathan deal with the fallout of the hospital by making calls to also find the source. Their discovery about the Flayed emerging into the Mind Flayer solidifies the scale of threat. Eventually, Alexei now explains the truth to Hopper, Joyce, and Murray. The Russians are building a giant machine to reopen the gate beneath Hawkins. Their base is directly underneath the Starcourt Mall, and their goal is to weaponize the Upside Down. With this revelation, Hopper makes a special call to a special number to contact Dr. Sam Owens. You remember from season 2? Elle finds Billy in the void using her powers. She takes his hand to ask what happened to him. He grabs her arm and she falls into Billy's mind, into a memory, and lands on a beach. At first, she finds herself in his childhood on a sunny California beach with his mom. She can see that far off there's a storm, an upside down storm, and she heads towards it. Back underground, Dustin and Erica, like in 1984's Red Dawn movie, they use their nerd skills to fight back, breaking into the room where Steve and Robin are being tortured. Dustin tases the evil Russian doctor. They manage to free Steve and Robin, who are totally high on True Serum and laughing hysterically. As Elle walks deeper into the landscape, the happy moment turns dark. The abusive, violent presence of Billy's father and his mother leaving him shatters the scene. We begin to understand Billy's inner pain of being abandoned and abused. This is one of the most important emotional beats of the season, making you feel something as we learn Billy is both a victim and a vessel. Elle presses on and finds the source, the steel mill, letting Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids know. As she tries to come out of the landscape, she amasses to find that she's alone in the cabin. Confused, she calls out, only to have Billy step out, and she realizes the Mind Flayer has found her and is in control of Billy. In a chilling confrontation inside Billy's landscape, he confronts Elle directly. He threatens her that the Flayed are an army and that they are coming for her, and that it's all her fault. Elle comes out of the void screaming in terror and riddled with guilt to Mike and the kids in the cabin. The climax of episode 6 comes with the Mind Flayer's full reveal. The townsfolk who have been flayed, including Heather and her parents and other random townsfolk and citizens, gather at the steel mill. We see just how many townsfolk are under the Mind Flayer's control as Heather and her parents and all these others willingly walk into the steel mill, down into the sewer drain. Their bodies are ready to be absorbed into the growing Mind Flayer. One by one, they collapse, their bodies melting into that fleshy liquid goo and merging together. Mind Flayer grows into a towering monster ready to hunt Elle. This cult-like sequence recalls the invasion of the Body Snatchers, and we end the scene with a growing Mind Flayer busting out of the sewer through the steel mill floor. Episode 7 is titled The Bite. Episode 7 kicks off with the 4th of July carnival in full swing. Fireworks explode in the night sky, neon lights shine across the fairground. The scene gives off nostalgic vibes of the peak all-American classic 1980s patriotism, a nod to the 1987 movie The Lost Boys, until horror literally crashes the party. We see Ted, Karen, and Holly Wheeler on the top of the Ferris wheel, and Holly notices something large moving through the trees. Meanwhile, still at Hopper's cabin, which is close to the carnival, Elle tells the kids, Nancy and Jonathan, about what Billy said to her in the void. The Mind Flayer is going to end everyone. With the fireworks going on in the background, Nancy hears something more. They all run outside to see. It's the Mind Flayer at a distance coming for them. This is the penultimate episode with a massive reveal. The Mind Flayer's true body has taken full monstrous form. Towering and grotesque, they all look terrified, especially Elle after knowing it wants to kill her and her friends. Next, we cut to the the Scoops Troop, with Dustin driving the Russian cart back with Steve and Robin still feeling the effects of the drugs, and Dustin and Erica looking at them like they are crazy. They make it back to the elevator where they came down in to take it back up. Watching Steve and Robin riding this elevator up high was hilarious, as Dustin and Erica watch cluelessly wondering what the fuck is so funny. They make it to the surface and come waltzing out the door, outside to the back of the mall. As they strut out towards the gate of the mall thinking they're safe, two Russian guards happen to walk by. That victory was short-lived as the Scoops Troop run to a side door of the mall with the Russians giving chase. Cutting right back to the cabin, we see Nancy and Jonathan looking for whatever weapons they can find, while the kids use the couch, the china cabinet, table, and other furniture to block the doors and the windows. In the middle of the cabin, they all stand back to back, ready to fight. The Mind Flayer attacks, using one of its huge-ass tentacles to smash through the wall. Jonathan uses an axe to attack it, but it slams him down. Nancy uses a shotgun to shoot the shit out of it. Just as it's about to grab Nancy by the face, Eleven unleashes her powers and stops it, and rips the tentacle into two pieces. Another tentacle smashes through the ceiling and grabs Elle's left leg. Mike and the others all desperately grab onto Elle to pull her back. Nancy shoots it, but nothing. Lucas sees and grabs the axe and chops at the tentacle, biting Elle's leg, and chops her free. Mike sees that the tentacle is still biting on Elle's leg and rips it off of her. Even though Elle is injured, so is the Mind Flayer, and using all her strength and powers, she rips the Mind Flayer's face in two. While it's hurt, they all make a run for it, jumping into Nancy's car and driving off. The Scoops Troop is still on the run from the Russians in the back corridors of the mall. They come out into the movie theater, which is playing Back to the Future. We see some clips of Doc and Marty in the DeLorean as they split up to find seats and hide out. Dustin sneaks out to use the walkie-talkie to try to reach the other kids, leaving Erica in charge of babysitting a very still high Steve and Robin. Next, we see the adults driving the convertible as Joyce and Hopper bicker again. Murray, tired of their bickering, bugs out on them to either quit their bickering or pull over, admit their feelings, and get it on. A sentiment everyone is sharing at this point in the season. Pulling in hot to Bradley's Big Buy grocery store, Nancy and the kids break in and look for medical supplies to clean Elle's wound. Looking at Elle's wound, it's way worse than they thought, needing Mike to hold pressure on it to stop the bleeding so Max can clean, disinfect, and bandage her up. As the kids look for supplies in the grocery store, Mike and Elle talk about the bitchin' scar that she'll have. They hear the walkie go off with Dustin calling out code red. Finally, we see Mike and Dustin link back up, only to have it cut short because Dustin is breaking up, Mike cannot hear him clearly, and the battery is on Dustin's walkie dies. Finally, all bandaged up, Elle goes into the void to find Dustin. They gather a shopping cart's worth of supplies and fireworks from Bradley's and head to the mall to find Dustin. As they leave the store, the camera pans over to Elle's blood on the floor, and we see it move like it's been infected by the Mind Flayer. Back to the movie theater, Dustin returns to his seat to find that Steve and Robin have slipped out. Dying of thirst, they drink, see some pretty lights, get the spins, and run to puke in the bathroom. At the carnival, Joyce, Hopper, Murray, and Alexei pull up. Joyce and Hopper go looking for the kids, leaving Murray and Alexei in the car. Mayor Klein spots them from afar and goes running like a bitch to go call and rat them out to the Russians. Meanwhile, Steve and Robin share another heart-to-heart moment after their earlier scene when they were all tied up, vulnerable, and high in the Russian base. No longer high on the Russian truth serum, Robin, in a bathroom confession, admits she never had a crush on Steve. Instead, she reveals that she's a lesbian and she really liked Tammy Thompson the whole time. It's one of the season's most heartfelt twists, giving Robin depth beyond her sarcasm and squashing any romantic ideas that Steve or fans may have thought. Their friendship solidifies here as one of the emotional anchors of the season. The scene cuts back to Bradley's Big Buy store and we see Billy entering and going straight to where Elle's blood is on the floor. He touches it and you can tell he knows exactly where she's going. Coming out of the convertible at the carnival, Murray and Alexei attempt to blend into the patriotic crowd. Alexei plays a dart game and wins the crowd of the kids over as he goes for the big prize, a Woody Woodpecker stuffy. While Murray goes to get some all-American corn dogs, tragedy strikes. Alexei, finally beginning to embrace his unlikely role as part of the team, is shot by the Russian Terminator assassin. His death is bittersweet, R.I.P. Smirnov, and it's underscored by Murray's grief, Joyce's silence, and Hopper's rage. They realize the Russian assassinator, that Terminator guy, has tracked them to the fair. Running for their lives, Hopper and Joyce separate. Back in theaters, Dustin and Erica find a now sober Steve and Robin, and they try to leave with the exiting movie crowd of people, only to find the Russian guards are waiting for them. They're spotted and they make a run for it. The carnival scene intensifies as more Russians that Mayor Klein called show up to kill Hopper. Hopper engages in another brutal fistfight scene, grabbing a walkie-talkie, narrowly escaping as the Russian Terminator assassin proves relentless. This direct nod to the Terminator intensifies with the guy's silent, unstoppable, menacing brute force. With Joyce, Murray, and Hopper speeding away in the convertible, the walkie-talkie starts to go off in Russian. Murray intercepts the message, which is about some kids at the Starcourt Mall. Knowing it's their kids, Joyce steps on the gas towards the mall. The scene cuts over to the Russians in the mall with the walkie-talkies and guns, approaching where the Scoops troop is hiding behind a food court counter on the ground floor. In a classic distraction move, we see the model convertible come to life, a nod to the 1987 Maximum Overdrive movie. In true dramatic hero entrance, Elle with the gang right behind her are on the level above, and she uses her powers to throw the car, knocking out the armed Russian guards, finally reuniting the Scoops troop, Elle, and all the other kids. The kids run over to each other and start telling each other everything, when suddenly the camera pans over to Elle. She's looking really bad, like she's got a fever, and she collapses, screaming about her leg. Rushing to her, they unbandage her leg to see that the Mind Flayer has infected her with a piece of itself, and it's moving around in her leg, as we end the episode with Elle screaming in pain. Episode 8, The Battle of Starcourt. We open with Murray confirming that the kids are at the food court in the Starcourt Mall, and Joyce driving like Mario Andretti racing to get there. Right where we left the kids in episode 7, Elle has collapsed from her leg injury. The group is shaken, and the 4th of July carnival still rages in the distance. But inside the Starcourt Mall, the Hawkins kids prepare for war. The first half of the finale splits the team into 3 missions. Hopper, Joyce, and Murray head to the Russian base to shut down the key, that massive machine keeping the gate to the Upside Down open. Nancy, Jonathan, Elle, Mike, Will, Max, and Lucas stay at the mall to protect Elle and buy time. The Scoops troop jumps into the yellow convertible to race to the radio tower, Cerebo, you remember from episode 1, to coordinate the other 2 groups for battle. This 3-pronged structure pays homage to the 1980s ensemble finales from Return of the Jedi to the Goonies. Inside the mall, the group attempts to remove the Mind Flayer's infection from Elle's leg. What follows is pure body horror. Finding and disinfecting a knife in the Japanese eatery, Jonathan slices into her wound. With Elle biting down on a wooden spoon, he tries to pull it out. Wreathing in pain, Elle stops him, and using the last bit of her powers, she pulls out the twisted, fleshy, living piece of the Mind Flayer. The gore is straight out of the thing. As this tadpole-sized Mind Flayer crawls away, Hopper stomps it out in reuniting the adults with the kids. Finally, all of the main characters that we love come together. I don't know about y'all, but I was jumping up and screaming, yes, as the 80s classic heroic music is heard in the background of this emotional reunion. This gives joy, release, and a pause from the horror. As they share info and using the map Alexei drew of the underground Russian facility, their plan starts to come together, but not before Hopper realizes they need to separate for the 3-front attack. On one front, Hopper and Joyce leave to infiltrate the Russian base with Murray translating. Their dynamic blends action and comedy, especially as Murray deals with being the third wheel in the still bickering partnership as they plummet down the elevator. But the humor fades when that elevator door opens and armed Russian guards are standing there. Murray tries to handle it by speaking Russian, but Hopper turns into Rambo, shooting them dead. Using the Russian uniforms as a disguise, they make it to the vent where Murray, aka Bald Eagle, goes down to the control room to mess with the machine's power source. Back at Starcourt, the kids, aka the Griswold family, a nod to the 1983 National Lampoon's Vacation movie, they try to leave the mall in Nancy's car, but Billy has taken the ignition cable out. Across the parking lot in the dark, Billy revs up the engine and flips on the headlights. We see his car pointed dead at them, a nod to the 1983 movie Christine. The kids jump out of the car and run back in the mall to hide, changing their plans. Elle realizes her powers aren't recharging. Finding a Coke can in the food court trash bin, Elle tries to crush it. We see her remember her time with Papa, where she first crushed a Coke can. In perfect timing with that revelation and in true monstrous fashion, the kids hear the crushing thuds on the roof of the mall. Will feels that tingle in the back of his neck as they all look up. The Mind Flayer smashes into the mall in this thunderous set piece, splitting the kids up and sending them to take cover in different places. In a game of hide and seek, the kids scramble to stay alive, moving to stay safe, and Lucas comes through with the slingshot distraction. All of them run to escape the Mind Flayer. From the high point of the radio tower Cerebo, Steve notices the lights at the mall are flickering like crazy, and he knows something is wrong. Him and Robin take off to help, dividing the scoop troop, leaving Dustin and Erica to navigate Murray the Bald Eagle through the air vents of the Russian base. With the kids separated, Max, Mike, and Elle go running out to the back of the mall, while the others make a run for the car to the front of the mall. Nancy, armed with a pew-pew, ready for Billy, while Jonathan tries to get the car started using the ignition cable from the flipped car in the mall. Billy comes racing at them as Nancy shoots. Out of nowhere, Steve finally has his big hero moment as he T-bones Billy's car, saving the others. For the first time, Steve and Robin see the Mind Flayer standing on top of the Starcourt Mall like he's King Kong. They jump in the car with Will, Lucas, Jonathan, and Nancy, speeding off with the Mind Flayer chasing close behind. At the radio tower, Dustin coordinates with Susie. Yes, Susie, his mysterious girlfriend from Salt Lake City, Utah. She finally makes an appearance on screen. Dustin needs her scientific brain to say Planck's constant and give them the code so Hopper and Joyce can unlock the key so they can detonate the machine. Before giving it up, Susie Pooh convinces Dusty Bun to sing their duet from the Never-Ending Story. This absurdity and nostalgia of this musical interlude, making every 80s baby like me sing along with the fate of Hawkins hanging in balance, is pure homage taxes paid by the Duffer Brothers. After the smashing duet, Susie gives the code to Hopper and Joyce, and they get the shutdown key. They fight through the Russian facility. Their path is blocked by that relentless Russian assassin, Hopper's own Terminator. The brutal fistfight in the machine chamber is raw and desperate, echoing Arnold Schwarzenegger's unstoppable force from the Terminator. Hopper barely survives, tossing the assassin into the machine reactor field. Billy now wakes up from the car crash. Seeing Elle, Max, and Mike, he chases them with that slow-ass Michael Myers walk into the mall. Since they're all connected, the Mind Flayer knows that Elle's not in the car and turns around. Immediately, everyone in the car takes notice, and Jonathan whips that car around, and they head back to Starcourt. Reaching a locked door in a dead end, Billy catches up to Mike's, Elle, and Max. Max and Mike try to stop Billy, but he knocks them out. Picking up Elle, he carries her back to the food court, and we see the Mind Flayer come back through the roof. Chaos erupts as Nancy, Jonathan, Lucas, Will, Steve, and Robin all throw lit fireworks, to distract the Mind Flayer from absorbing Elle. Sparks and neon explosions light up the monster, giving this carnival meets apocalypse vibe. Elle tries to escape, but the Mind Flayer commands Billy to drag her ass back. Still weak from her injury, and she can't hold off Billy as he pins her to the ground. Remembering his mindscape from episode 6, Elle reaches Billy by reminding him of his childhood memories, his mother, the beach, his childhood when he was happy. Reclaiming his humanity, we see Billy beat the possession, and in a moment of redemption, he fights back. In a heroic sacrifice, Billy shields Elle from the Mind Flayer, and he is impaled multiple times by its tendrils while Max and the others all watch. R.I.P. Billy. His death is both tragic and redemptive, closing his arc with raw emotion, leaving a permanent scar in Max. As Billy falls, Hopper faces his own choice. In the Russian machine chamber, the machine spins out of control. Hopper is trapped on the wrong side of that blast zone. With one final look at Joyce, he nods a smile for her to finish the mission. Joyce closes her eyes, and with the tears streaming down, she uses a belt on one key, stretches, and pulls to turn both keys, detonating the machine and closing the gate. The explosion annihilates the machine, some Russians that were rushing in there, and seemingly Hopper himself. We see military helicopters fly into Hawkins carrying Sam Owens and a ton of soldiers. Police and firefighters arrive, and the kids try to regroup. The aftermath is devastating. Billy lies dead, Hopper is gone, and the kids are all left broken. But the Mind Flayer collapses, severed from its upside-down connection. Hawkins is saved, at least for now. The final 20 minutes of the episode are an extended epilogue that jumps us 3 months ahead. We see an 80s TV news show report on the summer events in Hawkins, Indiana. Steve and Robin are looking for new jobs in a video store since the mall burned down. But more importantly, we see the Byers family prepare to move away from Hawkins. Elle, still powerless, joins them. For all of us fans, it was so bittersweet to watch as they emptied Joyce's house into a U-Haul, packed away Hopper's clothes, and donated and passed down childhood memories. Joyce finds the speech Hopper never gave to Mike and Elle. You know, the 3 inches with the door. We see her pain as she mourns Hopper. It's absolutely heart-wrenching, seeing the empty house where it all started, watching all the kids hug and say their goodbyes, Will crying, and knowing the kids are splitting up after 3 seasons of shared trauma had me in tears. I was bawling. The best part of this scene was Elle saying, "I love you too" to Mike, and knowing they would see each other for Thanksgiving and Christmas. The episode seemingly ends as Joyce closes the door. But in true Stranger Things fashion, the finale closes with a twist. The snow falls, and somewhere in Russia, we see a Russian prison camp where guards feed a prisoner to a demogorgon. They refer to another captive only as the American.
Welcome back, invaders, to the Upside Down. After 2 long years for both us and the residents of Hawkins, Stranger Things is finally back. But before we start covering Season 5, we are diving headfirst into a recap of Season 4. My name is Xander, and this is your complete, spoiler-filled recap of Stranger Things Season 4. So grab your Eggos, double-check your Christmas lights, and let's get into it. Chapter 1, The Hellfire Club. The episode kicks off with a brutal flashback to 1979, right inside Hawkins' lab's infamous Rainbow Room. We see the return of Dr. Brenner, aka Papa, who we all thought was a Demogorgon snack back in Season 1. He's testing a kid known as Number 10, pushing his psychic abilities to locate someone. But the test takes a horrifying turn when 10 senses a massacre in another room. The lights go crazy, and when a dazed Brenner comes to, he finds the entire facility in ruins. The halls are a bloodbath, with every single child and guard brutally murdered. And in the middle of it all, standing alone in the Rainbow Room, is a young 11, covered in blood. A horrified Brenner can only whisper, "What did you do?" before the iconic credits roll. After that absolutely insane opener, we jump to 1986. We catch up with Elle, who's writing a super cheerful letter to Mike about her new life in California, but it's all a lie. The reality is she's being relentlessly bullied by a truly awful girl named Angela. Meanwhile, Joyce is trying to sell encyclopedias, Jonathan and his new stoner friend Argyle are always high, and Will is acting weird. Maybe over a girl? Back in Hawkins, the party is fracturing. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas are now freshmen and have joined the epic D&D club, the Hellfire Club, led by the chaotic senior Eddie Munson. But Lucas has also joined the basketball team, causing some tension. While Dustin and Susie are still going strong and Steve and Robin are still on the hunt for love, one person is missing. Max. She's completely withdrawn from everyone after Billy's death, with Lucas saying it's like she's a ghost. The gang is at the high school pep rally, and let's just say the cringe is pretty strong in this one. We're introduced to Jason Carver, the quintessential basketball captain who's dating head cheerleader Chrissy Cunningham. He gives this painfully awkward speech, vaguely referencing the townfolk who perished in that fire, aka everyone who was possessed by the Mind Flayer, and says the best way to honor them is by, you guessed it, winning the big game tonight. And it hits Mike and Dustin. Lucas's big game is the exact same time as Eddie's long-awaited D&D campaign. Lucas begs them to get Eddie to reschedule, but Mike points out that he's been a bench warmer all season. Meanwhile, in California, things are going from bad to so much worse for Elle. She's giving a school presentation about her hero, her dad, Hopper. She even made an incredible diorama of their cabin, complete with a handmade Hopper figurine, but of course, Angela and her crew just mock her, saying the project was supposed to be about famous people. A tearful Elle insists Hopper was a hero, but it is to no use. Later, in the courtyard, Angela straight up trips her, and a lackey stomps on the diorama, shattering the Hopper figurine. And this is where Elle kind of snaps. Through tears of pure rage, she has a horrible reflex. She stretches out her hand and screams, trying to use her powers, but nothing happens. And the entire courtyard just erupts in laughter. It is absolutely heartbreaking to watch. Seriously, though, the Demodogs are welcome to come for Angela anytime. Back in Hawkins, Max is heading to her school counselor, Miss Kelly. On her way in, she sees Chrissy leaving the office looking seriously distraught. During her own session, Max lies, saying she's sleeping fine and doesn't have headaches, but we can see she's still haunted by Billy's death. Things are rough at home too, with her mom working 2 jobs and drinking. In the bathroom, Max takes a pill for the headache she totally doesn't have, and hears someone getting sick in a stall, it's Chrissy, who tells her to go away. But as Max leaves, something seriously creepy starts happening. Chrissy starts hearing her mom's voice, asking if she's ready for her dress. The voice gets all distorted and demonic, screaming that she'll gut you like the fat pig you are. The lights go crazy, the stall door shakes, and then we see them. These gross, slithering feet under the stall door. It's our first proper tease of the new big bad, Vecna. Chrissy screams, and then just like that, it's over. The voice is gone, the feet are gone, and she's alone in a silent bathroom, completely traumatized. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's talk about Eddie Munson. This guy has more energy than a caffeinated Demogorgon, literally jumping on cafeteria tables to mock everyone for their boring conformist lives. So you can imagine how well it goes when Mike and Dustin have to ask him to move his huge D&D campaign called the Cult of Vecna, which sounds super chill and not ominous at all, for a basketball game. Unsurprisingly, moving the campaign is a hard no. Their mission? find a substitute player. And after failing to recruit literally anyone else in the entire school, Dustin has a stroke of genius. They need a master strategist, a certified badass. They need Erica Sinclair. Meanwhile, Joyce is having a day. She gets a super creepy doll in the mail from Russia and calls the one person who can handle this level of weird Murray. In true Murray fashion, he tells her to undress it and look for a wire, but she finds something inside that changes everything. A note made from the cutout letters that read, "Hopper lives." Joyce just found out what we already knew, and her world has officially been turned upside down. And now we get to catch up with Jonathan and Nancy, who are clearly on the rocks, with both of them making excuses for why they can't see each other over the break. Their dream of going to college together is looking shakier by the minute. Back in Hawkins, we get to check in on Chrissy, who's now seeing things in the woods, specifically a creepy grandfather clock in a tree that spills out a bunch of spiders. Nope, thank you. She meets up with Eddie to buy drugs, and they share a surprisingly sweet moment, bonding over not being who people expect. But Chrissy is clearly terrified, and she asks Eddie for something stronger than just weed. Now it's go time. At the championship game, Lucas is heartbroken to see his friends aren't in the stands. That's because they're in the basement with Erica, who makes a legendary entrance and immediately earns Eddie's respect with her epic D&D credentials. And from here, the episode cuts back and forth in an absolutely epic parallel sequence. In the game, Lucas, the eternal benchwarmer, is suddenly thrown into the final play. In the basement, Dustin and Erica are making a last-ditch effort to defeat Vecna. And in a perfectly synchronized moment of awesome, Erica makes a critical hit to slay the D&D villain, and Lucas sinks the game-winning shot. Hawkins wins the first time in 22 years. But the celebration is cut short. We see Max, who's been listening to the game, cleaning up after her mom. She sees Eddie pull up to his trailer with Chrissy. Inside, as Eddie looks for the drugs, Chrissy hears that dreaded clock chime again, and this time, Vecna isn't just whispering. She's pulled into a full-blown nightmare where her parents are monstrous, stitched-up horrors. And then we see him, Vecna, a humanoid monster covered in vines who tells her, "Your suffering is at an end." Back in the real world, Eddie can only watch in utter horror as Chrissy's body starts to levitate. Her bones snap, and her eyes, well, it's like the most gruesome death we've seen in Stranger Things so far. And just like that, the first episode ends on a truly shocking and horrifying cliffhanger. Chapter 2, Vecna's Curse. We're thrown right back into the chaos of the Season 3 finale. The machine explodes, the gate is sealed, and the platform is engulfed in flames. But this time, we see the secret escape we never witnessed. Hopper didn't get sucked into the Upside Down. Instead, he made a desperate leap to a lower platform, fighting through the wreckage, only to be immediately captured at gunpoint by waiting Russian soldiers. He's taken to Russia, where he's brutally tortured for information. And when he refuses to give up Joyce, he's not set free. Oh no, he's sent to a place the guards simply call hell. A brutal work camp. Back in Hawkins, Max jolts awake from another nightmare. As she's dealing with her now constant headache, she sees a police convoy swarm Eddie Munson's trailer. His uncle is outside, completely distraught, and when the cops enter the trailer, they are horrified by what they find. Max sneaks a peek and sees the gruesome, twisted truth for herself. Chrissy's lifeless body. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite side of the country, the California crew is waiting for Mike at the airport. The reunion is awkward. Mike brings Elle flowers, but the card is signed just from Mike, which definitely doesn't escape her notice. Will is holding a rolled up painting he clearly made for Mike, but after their stiff hello, he decides against giving it to him. As Elle excitedly talks about her plans, Will is left walking behind them, looking completely left out and confused when Elle brushes off Mike's question about her friends. But the real plot thickening is happening back at the Byers house. Murray shows up to decipher the creepy Russian doll message. The full note is a mess, but it mentions Enzo, the restaurant for Hop and Joyce's failed date, which Joyce says is proof it's really from him. Murray, the ever-paranoid realist, thinks it's a trap set by the KGB who tortured Hopper for that personal detail, but Joyce isn't hearing it. Her mantra, "There was no body." She's convinced a very reluctant Murray to make the call. The man who answers is Enzo. He lays out the deal. Joyce and Murray have to go to Alaska and pay a man named Yuri $40,000 from Hopper's trust fund. But when Joyce demands to speak to Hopper to prove he's alive, Enzo says he can't because Hopper is, and I quote, stuck. Back at the Byers house, Joyce and Murray are playing detective. They've got a recording of their call with Enzo, and by cranking up Jonathan's sound system, they isolate a voice in the background calling him a mooser, Russian slang for pig. The pieces start to click into place. Hopper is stuck in a Russian prison, and Enzo is likely a guard he's bribed for help. With this new intel, a determined Joyce gives the order. They are going to Alaska. Meanwhile, the California crew is having a much, much worse day. Jonathan and Argyle drop Mike, Will, and Elle at Wrinklemania, where Will is instantly relegated to third wheel duty. Elle, trying to keep up her happy facade, lies to Mike, claiming she's a regular at this very skating rink. Will pulls her aside, warning her that Mike will be hurt when he finds out the truth. And oh, is the truth coming. The nightmare herself, Angela, shows up with her entire crew. She puts on a sickening sweet act for Mike, pretending to be Elle's friend before dragging her onto the rink. A circle forms, trapping Elle in the center as the DJ dedicates the song Wipeout to her. What follows is pure, brutal humiliation. The kids swarm her, calling her a freak and mocking her failed attempt to use her powers. As Elle covers her ears and cries, Mike fights to get the music stopped, but it's too late. A lackey throws a milkshake in Elle's face, sending her crashing to the ground in a moment of total defeat. While a frantic Mike searches for Elle, he and Will have a long overdue blow-up. Will calls out Mike for not only calling him a handful of times all year, while writing Elle a book of letters. He's tired of being the third wheel, and feeling like their friendship is over. Mike, defensive, shoots back that it's not all his fault. But Elle isn't running away this time. She finds Angela and demands an apology. Angela, with a vicious smile, delivers the lowest blow possible. Cry to your daddy. Oh wait, you can't. And that's the final straw. This time, Elle doesn't reach for her powers that she doesn't have. She reaches for the next best thing, a burst of pure raw instinct. She grabs a roller skate and smashes it directly into Angela's face. As everyone rushes to a screaming, bloodied Angela, Mike finally finds Elle. Staring at her in shock, he echoes the words of Dr. Brenner from the premiere. And honestly, given what Angela put her through, a plastic skate to the face feels like a pretty justified response. While the rink drama unfolds, Jonathan and Argyle are having a deep moment at an abandoned junkyard. Jonathan confesses he got into Lenora Community College and is ditching his and Nancy's dream school, Emerson. Why? He doesn't want to leave his family to chase a dream that was never really his. The real kicker, he knows if he tells Nancy, she'll give up on her own dreams to stay with him, and he's terrified she'll end up resenting him for it. Back in Hawkins, the town is reeling. News breaks of a murdered teen girl, and the cops question Jason about Chrissy. Was she with Eddie? Buying drugs? Jason, horrified, insists his perfect girlfriend would never associate with a freak like Munson. His grief quickly twists into a vengeful rage. He becomes convinced that Eddie and his satanic D&D club Hellfire sacrificed Chrissy to the devil, and he is whipping his teammates into a frenzy, launching a full-on witch hunt for Eddie. Even when Lucas timidly defends Hellfire as just a game, Jason dismisses it, claiming D&D warps reality and creates killers. The hunt for the freak is officially on. But Max knows there's more to the story. She confides in Dustin that she saw Eddie with Chrissy, and then saw him flee in terror. She thinks the Upside Down might be back. Teaming up with Steve and Robin at the video store, they track a terrified Eddie to his hiding spot. After Eddie recounts the horrific supernatural death, Dustin drops the mother of all explanations, the Upside Down. When Eddie describes Chrissy being in a trance, it clicks. Dustin realizes that they're not dealing with a human killer, but a D&D villain brought to life. Vecna, a powerful undead spellcaster. And as he says it, we see Vecna himself, hooked up to pulsating vines in the Upside Down, as if he was charging up for his next attack. Meanwhile, Nancy is playing reporter, sneaking into the trailer park with her co-worker Fred, but things take a dark turn when a cop suddenly accuses Fred of being responsible for a fatal car crash. For a moment, the cop's voice distorts and his eyes turn white, chanting murderer at a terrified Fred before everything snaps back to normal. Nancy then gets a crucial lead from Eddie's uncle Wayne. He doesn't believe Eddie is capable of murder. Instead, he points to a local boogeyman from his childhood, Victor Creel, a man who allegedly murdered his whole family years ago. Wayne thinks Creel has broken out of the asylum. But while Nancy is investigating, Fred hears the telltale chime of a clock. He's drawn into the woods where a group of zombie-like figures chant murderer at him. Nancy realizes he's gone and sounds the alarm, but it's too late. Fred is trapped in a Vecna-induced nightmare, reliving his car crash and facing his deepest guilt. And just like Chrissy, Vecna appears, offers him a place by his side, and then executes him. Fred's body levitates, his bones snap, and his eyes are taken in another gruesome, shocking conclusion. The body count is rising, and Vecna's curse is spreading. Chapter 3, The Monster and the Superhero. This episode kicks off with a major new threat. Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan. He's paying a not-so-friendly visit to Dr. Owens, convinced that the source of all evil is 11, whom he calls Brenner's little pet. He believes she's a trained remote assassin. Even after a full search of Owens' house turns up nothing, Sullivan is not backing down. The hunt for Elle is officially on. Meanwhile, in California, the car ride home is interesting. A deeply stoned Jonathan and Argyle are trying to cheer Elle up, philosophizing about the forgiving nature of soft plastic skate wheels. But back at the house, the mood sours fast. Murray's there, whipping up a suspiciously timed risotto, while Joyce nervously mentions her sudden business trip to Alaska. Will is confused, Jonathan is too high to function, and Mike is sulking so hard he could power a small city, when Argyle accidentally spills the beans about the rink incident. Mike makes a snarky comment that finally pushes Elle over the edge. She storms off, leaving the room full of tension and one very clueless Joyce. The next morning, Mike tries to make amends. He finds Elle fixing her shattered Hopper diorama, and they finally have the real talk we've been waiting for. Elle lets him have it. He can't understand what it's like to be her, to be seen as a monster everywhere she goes. And then she calls him out on the one thing he can't say, that he loves her. She holds up a stack of letters, all signed just from Mike. Mike tries to reassure her that she's a superhero, but a defeated Elle simply replies, not anymore. And as if her day couldn't get worse, the cops show up. They arrest Elle for assaulting Angela, and her family can only watch in horror as she's shoved into a cop car. With Joyce already in the air, they're powerless to help. After a chilling interrogation where she admits she doesn't know if she wanted to kill Angela, Elle is fingerprinted and thrown into a van headed for juvie. But on a dark road, the van is stopped. A federal agent takes over, and who steps out of the shadows? Dr. Owens, greeting a shocked Elle with a simple, "Hey kiddo." Dr. Owens takes Elle to a diner to lay out the stakes. A war is coming to Hawkins. Again. He's developed a program that could not only restore her powers, but make them stronger than ever. But this time, the choice is hers. And of course, being the absolute hero she is, Elle agrees. Back in the frozen hell that is Russia, Hopper is putting a dangerous plan into motion. After a staged punishment, Enzo confirms that Joyce is on her way to Alaska. Now, Hop just has to escape a high-security prison to meet her. His plan? Bribe a fellow prisoner to break his ankle chains with a sledgehammer. But here's the truly hardcore part. Hopper didn't want the chain broken. He wanted his ankles broken. The sheer brutal determination of this man is almost too much to handle. Back in Hawkins, Vecna is already choosing his next victim. Patrick, one of Jason's basketball teammates, and Jason's vigilante mob is in full swing, dragging a very conflicted Lucas along as they hunt for Eddie. They track down Eddie's bandmates and get a lead on Dustin. Lucas, trying to sabotage the hunt, leads them on a wild goose chase to Hopper's old cabin before ditching them. Meanwhile, the real crew, Steve, Robin, Dustin, and Max, are with a panicked Eddie, breaking the news that the whole town thinks he's a murderer. Dustin tries to spin up a plan to find Vecna and clear his name, casually mentioning they're a little underpowered without their telekinetic friend. Their brainwashing session is cut short when they see a convoy of cop cars race by. Following the chaos, they arrive at a horrifying scene, the twisted, mangled body of Fred Benson. And there's Nancy, shaken but relieved to see a familiar face in the crowd. The gang is back together, and the clock is ticking faster than ever. The gang quickly catches Nancy up, and they connect the dots. Both Chrissy and Fred were acting strange before they died, like they were being stalked. Max remembers seeing Chrissy leaving the school counselor's office, and that became their next lead. They split up. Steve and Dustin take Max to see Miss Kelly for an impromptu therapy session, while Nancy and Robin head to the library to follow what Nancy calls a shot in the dark. While digging through old microfiche, they find a gold mine, an article from a conspiracy paper called The Weekly Watcher. It details Victor Creel's own story. He claimed an ancient demon haunted his house, and after a failed exorcism, the demon killed his family as revenge, leaving him alive to suffer. And that's when it hits them. What if the demon wasn't a demon at all? What if it was Vecna? Meanwhile, Max's attempt to subtly pump Miss Kelly for info goes nowhere, so she takes the direct approach, swiping the counselor's keys. She, Steve, and Dustin make a break for the school to break into her office files, and that's where they find the terrifying connection. Miss Kelly's notes reveal that both Chrissy and Fred suffered from headaches, nightmares, and past trauma, the exact same symptoms Max has been hiding. And as this horrifying realization dawns on her, she hears it. The clock, Vecna's voice, low and menacing, calling out to her. She's drawn into the hallway where a grandfather clock is now embedded in the wall. As Vecna's voice calls again, we see him in the upside down, powering up, his eyes snapping open, and the episode ends. Chapter 4, Dear Billy. Back in California with Elle gone and the government agents holding down the fort, Mike, Will, and Jonathan are rightfully suspicious of Dr. Owens. Will reminds Mike that they were the ones who saved him from the Mind Flayer, not some bureaucrat. And with Hawkins in danger, it's clear they need to get back home. Their plan? Call in the only reliable transport they know, Argyle and his surfer boy pizza van. While they pack, Mike finally apologizes to Will for being a distant friend, saying Hawkins hasn't been the same without him. But their escape hits a massive roadblock. The doorbell rings, and it's not their pizza delivering savior, it's the US military. A chaotic shootout erupts, leaving one agent down and the boys barely managing to drag a wounded second agent out of the house, where Argyle screeches up in his van just in the nick of time. Jumping back to Russia, Hopper is making his move. He fakes a broken tool to lure a guard into a shed, knocks him out, and then endures the agonizing task of pulling the chains over his brutally injured ankles. But of course, the one guard who's always on his case bursts in. A fight ensues, Gunshots ring out, and Hop makes a desperate escape through the roof. He commandeers his snowmobile and makes a miraculous dash over the hill, evading a hail of bullets. He makes it to the designated church to meet Yuri, and for one glorious heart-stopping moment, it looks like Jim Hopper might actually make it home. But over in Alaska, Joyce and Murray's rescue mission is going off the rails. They meet the eccentric smuggler Yuri, hand over $40,000, and settle in with some coffee while he counts the cash. Yuri then insists on calling Enzo to confirm Hopper is alive, and that's when he reveals his true slimy colors. He double-crossed them, planning to sell everyone out: Hopper, Enzo, Joyce, and Murray, to the highest bidder. As Joyce and Murray pass out from the drug coffee, Enzo is captured at the prison. And in the church, our last shred of hope is obliterated as Russian soldiers swarm in. In Hawkins, the clock is literally ticking for Max. The gang has less than 24 hours to figure out how to save her from Vecna's curse. Nancy and Robin hatch a plan to infiltrate Penhurst Asylum, posing as psychology students. Steve, meanwhile, is put on babysitting duty for Max, Dustin, and Lucas, a job he is thrilled about. At Penhurst, Nancy and Robin, or should I say Ruth and Rose, try to sweet-talk the head doctor, and surprisingly, it's a flustered and itchy Robin who manages to convince him. He gives them a tour, mentioning that music is a calming effect on disturbed minds, a detail that will become very important later. They finally get to Victor Creel's cell, and the man himself turns around, revealing he has no eyes, which he gruesomely removed himself. He tells them his story. His family bought a new house, but his sensitive son, Henry, sensed a dark presence. It started with mutilated animals and escalated to walking nightmares. Then, on the fateful night, with Ella Fitzgerald playing on the radio, his wife was levitated and killed. Victor was trapped in a vision of his most traumatic war memory, but he heard an angel's voice that pulled him back, though it was too late to save his children. Just as they're caught and kicked out, Robin connects the dots. The doctor said music reaches parts of the brain words can't. Music might be the key to fighting Vecna. At the same time, Max is preparing for the worst, writing goodbye letters to her friends. A visit home takes a terrifying turn when Vecna impersonates her mom, whispering that her time is almost up. Shaken, she demands Steve to drive her to Billy's grave. There, she finally breaks down, reading a heartbreaking letter to Billy. She confesses she replays his death in her head, wishing she could have saved him so they could have had a real chance to be brother and sister. Her final words to him are a gut-wrenching, "I'm so sorry, Billy." The emotional weight is almost too much to bear. But the moment of peace is shattered. The sky turns into a deep crimson, and a vision of Billy appears, clad in the bloody clothes from his death. He viciously twists Max's apology, claiming a part of her was relieved that he died. Max flees through a terrifying fog-shrouded graveyard, stumbling upon a grotesque house. She sees the twisted corpses of Chrissy and Fred, and Vecna himself emerges, sending vines that snatch her and bind her to a pillar. Back in the real cemetery, her friends are in a full-blown panic. Max's body is levitating, locked in Vecna's trance. Dustin screams into the walkie for Nancy and Robin, who are themselves fleeing Penhurst security. Just in time, they get the message. Dustin grabs Max's Walkman, yelling, "What's her favorite song?" as Vecna reaches for her mind. A familiar synth intro cuts through the nightmare. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill. In the Upside Down, Max hears it. A portal of light opens, showing her real body and flashing memories of her friends. Fueled by the music, she rips free from the vines and makes a desperate running leap toward the light as Vecna rages behind her. Her eyes fly open in the real world, and she crashes to the earth. Gasping, Lucas cradles her as she sobs the three most relieving words we've ever heard: "I'm still here." Thanks to Kate Bush and her friends, Max Mayfield has cheated death. For now. Chapter 5, The Nina Project. The California crew is in a full-blown crisis, speeding away from a military shootout with a dying federal agent in the back of the van. As Jonathan, Mike, and Will try to stop the bleeding, the agent gasps a crucial warning: don't go to a hospital. They have to warn Dr. Owens. 11 is in danger. He says to contact him through someone named Nina, but he dies before he can give the number. Argyle manages to lose their pursuers with some reckless driving, pulling over in the middle of the desert to bury the agent. And poor Argyle, the only one not used to this level of chaos, is having a complete meltdown over superpowered girlfriends and evil government conspiracies. So what's the solution? The same one that solves all of Argyle's problems: a hefty dose of purple palm tree delight. I'm starting to think that stuff is laced with actual magic. Will tries to console a guilt-ridden Mike who's spiraling over every what if. If the agent had lived a second longer, if he had just told Elle he loved her, a now very chilled out Argyle makes a tombstone from a pizza box. But the agent's pen seems out of ink, and that's when it clicks for Mike. Why give them a dead pen? He unscrews it, and bingo. A tiny rolled up paper with a phone number falls out. They rush to a payphone only to discover the number connects to a computer. They need a hacker. And Mike knows only one person for the job: the legendary Susie from Salt Lake City. The same Susie who once saved the world with a perfect rendition of the Never Ending Story theme. If they drive through the night, they can reach her by morning. But over in Russia, the mood is anything but hopeful. Hopper has been brutally beaten and thrown into a freezing outdoor cell where he makes a shocking discovery. Enzo is in there with him, and Enzo confirms their worst fears. Yuri betrayed them all. A furious Hopper lays into him, screaming that he swore Yuri could be trusted. The escape plan has completely collapsed. In a moment of rare quiet, Hopper opens up to Enzo about his past. He reveals the source of his deep-seated guilt, serving in the chemical corps, where he was exposed to Agent Orange. He was told it was harmless, but it was a lie that followed him home. He confesses that he hid the risks from his wife, and when his daughter Sarah died of cancer, he was consumed by the belief that he was a curse to everyone he loved. Their heart-to-heart is cut short by a distant, monstrous snarl. The rumored monster from America is nearby. Meanwhile, at 30,000 feet, Joyce and Murray are turning the tables. Joyce smashes a jar of peanut butter and uses a shard to cut them free. When Yuri pulls a gun, Murray steps up, boasting about his black belt earned by sparring with teenagers, and it turns out he's actually got the skills. He takes Yuri down, but knocks him out cold, leaving them with one problem. They have no idea how to fly a plane. What follows is a white-knuckle, chaotic crash landing as they plummet from the sky, somehow managing to survive by crash landing in a snowy forest. In Hawkins, Mac is sketching her visions, and Nancy makes a crucial connection. The house Mac saw belongs to Victor Creel. The team breaks into the abandoned, creepy Creel House, splitting up to investigate. They realize the flickering lights mean Vecna is in the house with them. In the upside-down version of the house, that is. But the horror escalates elsewhere. Jason's hunt leads them to Reefer Rick's, forcing Eddie to flee by boat. As Jason and his teammate Patrick swim after him, Patrick is suddenly yanked underwater. He levitates above the lake, his bones snapping in Vecna's grip. A horror witnessed by both a terrified Eddie and a stunned Jason. Finally, we catch up with Eleven. Owens has brought her to a top-secret bunker to meet Nina. And waiting for her, there is the last person she wanted to see, Dr. Brenner. As Elle tries to flee, the guards restrain her and inject her with a sedative. It was a trap all along. Eleven wakes up in a living nightmare. She's back in a Stark room at Hawkins' lab, wearing the infamous hospital gown, her head freshly shaved. This is her past, and she's trapped in it. She flees into the hallway, but every door she opens leads right back to the Rainbow Room, where a creepy orderly greets her. Dr. Brenner's voice calmly explains over the intercom. He tells her the story of an opera called Nina, about a woman who buried a traumatic memory. The message is clear. This isn't real. It's a simulation designed to make her confront the truth she's buried. In the real world, we see the truth. Elle is suspended in a sensory deprivation tank, hooked up to the Nina Project, a machine built to help her reclaim her lost memories and powers. Reluctantly, Elle gives into the memory. We see her as a young, struggling test subject, mocked by the other children for her weak powers. But the memory turns gruesome when she looks down to find her hands drenched in blood. The distant screams of the 1979 massacre echo, and in the real world, her body goes into cardiac arrest. After being revived, Elle fights back with a surge of raw emotion, using her telekinesis to blast the guards against the walls. For a glorious moment, her powers are back, but when she turns that fury on Brenner, nothing happens. Brenner reveals this was just a test. The door behind her opens, she's free to leave, but without his help, her powers may never fully return. Faced with an impossible choice, a defeated Elle tentatively takes his outstretched hand. "Papa?" she says. "Daughter," he responds. Chapter 6, The Dive. Back in the Russian prison, Hopper and the other inmates are led into a room with a bizarre sight, a massive, indulgent feast. While the others dig in, Hopper stays suspicious, only taking a small amount of vodka. Another prisoner explains the grim rumor. This is the last meal for those thrown into a pit with an otherworldly monster. But he's weirdly optimistic, thinking the food is going to make them stronger for the fight. Hopper quickly shatters that delusion. He tells them they're not there to train the monster, they're the main course. The food isn't for their strength, it's to fatten them up. Talk about a party pooper. Later, a drunken Hopper picks a fight with Enzo, leading to a brawl where he manages to steal a guard's lighter. Back in their cell, Enzo confronts him and Hopper reveals his brilliant plan. He now has a lighter and vodka for fuel. The monster, a Demogorgon, has one weakness: fire. The fight was all a ruse to get the tools for their survival. Meanwhile, Joyce and Murray have turned the tables on their betrayer, Yuri. They've got him tied up to a tree and given him an ultimatum: die in the cold or take them to the prison. He chooses the latter. Their new plan? Infiltrate the prison by having Murray impersonate Yuri, while the real Yuri is gagged and posed as his prisoner. What could possibly go wrong? The California crew has finally made it to Susie's house in Salt Lake City. They walk into a whirlwind of chaos with what seems like 100 Mormon kids running around, and Argyle immediately gets starstruck by Susie's alt-rock sister, Eden. They find Susie on the roof, being her brilliantly eccentric self. To get her help, they spin a wild story about winning a fictional console called an American Tendo for Dustin. Susie, ever the hacker, agrees to help, despite despite her computer being confiscated. After a successful distraction mission, she pinpoints the location of the Nina Project, sending them on their way to find Elle. The rescue mission is back on. Back in the lab, Elle is deep in her training with Papa. Brenner explains that to get her powers back, she can't just remember her past, she has to relive it. But he warns her if she moves too fast, she could get lost in the darkness forever. No pressure, right? But a cryptic orderly lets Elle in on a secret. There was a number one. He was powerful, just like her, and he drew strength from a painful, angry memory. The orderly also reveals that the woman who visited her was her mother, directly contradicting Brenner's lie that she was dead. During a brutal training session where the kids are pitted against each other, Elle taps into the memory of her mother being taken away. Fueled by that rage, she unleashes a powerful blast that sends another child flying, but her victory makes her a target. Later, alone in the Rainbow Room, the other children brutally attack her as payback. In the aftermath, she sees a vision of her younger self covered in blood, surrounded by the bodies of the other test subjects. The terrible truth crashes down on her, and she sobs to Brenner. I know what happened now. I killed them, didn't I, Papa? I killed them all. Meanwhile, in Hawkins, the situation is going from bad to worse. Jason has fully convinced the town that Eddie and the Hellfire Club are a satanic cult, and he whips the entire town into a witch hunt. Public wanted posters now feature Mike, Dustin, and Lucas right alongside Eddie. The gang tracks a panicked Eddie to Skull Rock. That's when Dustin makes a brilliant realization. His malfunctioning compass isn't broken. It's being drawn to a powerful electromagnetic field. And in the world of Stranger Things, that can only mean one thing: a new gate to the Upside Down. The compass leads them to the middle of Lover's Lake. Steve, ever the hero, dives in and confirms their worst fear. There's a gate at the bottom, but before he can get out, a vine yanks him down and through the portal. In a heart-stopping sequence, Nancy dives in after Steve without a second thought, followed by Robin and a very reluctant Eddie. Steve is immediately swarmed by a flock of terrifying demobats. The episode ends with him fighting for his life. Chapter 7, The Massacre at Hawkins' Lab. Back in the Russian prison, Hop and Enzo are bonding over being dads to unimpressed teenagers while awaiting their doomed fight. Meanwhile, Joyce and Murray's infiltration is a shocking success, thanks to Murray's flawless Russian and over-the-top acting. But their triumph turns to horror when they hear the unmistakable snarl of a Demogorgon from the pit below. The buzzer sounds and the fight begins. Hopper grabs a spear, ready to use his vodka-fueled flamethrower, and it won't light. As the Demogorgon rampages, his brilliant plan seems to be going up in smoke before it even starts. Up in the control room, Murray pulls a gun, but the guards refuse to help, so he does what he does best: karate. He takes them out, and a frantic Joyce starts mashing buttons until finally she hits the right one, opening the door for Hop and Enzo. They make a break for it, but the Demogorgon forces the doors back open. In a last-ditch effort, Hopper hurls his spear right back in the monster's mouth, forcing it back just long enough for the doors to seal shut. As another door opens up, Hop cautiously steps through and comes face to face with Joyce. She rushes into his arms, and after a moment of stunned disbelief, he holds her tight, finally allowing himself to smile. It's the reunion we've been waiting for since season 3. Meanwhile, in the Upside Down, a very shirtless Steve is being swarmed by demobats. Nancy, Robin, and Eddie drop in just in time, fighting them off with oars. Steve then does something truly metal, ripping a bat in half with his bare hands. Let's go, Steve. They retreat into the woods, where a woozy Steve gets patched up by Nancy, sparking yet another charged moment between them. In a surprisingly sweet moment, Eddie admits how he's always been jealous of how much Dustin idolizes Steve. He also points out that Nancy diving in to save him without a hesitation is, in his cynical opinion, as unambiguous a sign of true love as these eyes have ever seen. Seeking weapons, they head to the Upside Down versions of Nancy's house. But her guns are missing. As Nancy flips through her diary, she makes a terrifying discovery. The last entry is from November 6, 1983, the day Will vanished. The Upside Down isn't just a mirror of their world, it's a snapshot frozen in time. Steve and the group in the Upside Down realize they can faintly hear Dustin, Lucas, and Erica in the Wheeler kitchen. Dustin lays out a terrifying theory. Every time Vecna kills, he's not just taking a victim, he's using their psychic death to rip a permanent gate to their world. And if the Demogorgon was the Mind Flayer's foot soldier, then Vecna is his 5-star general. As they talk, Erica spots a flickering light. On the other side, the Upside Down crew discovers they can physically manipulate floating, shimmering particles around light fixtures. Eddie taps out an SOS in Morse code, and Dustin immediately knows his friends have done something incredibly stupid. Using Holly Wheeler's light bright, the two teams communicate, and the Hawkins crew learns their friends are stuck, and Dustin theorizes there must be a gate at every murder site. They all race to the first one, Eddie's trailer where Chrissy died. At the trailer, the Hawkins crew pokes a hole through the gate in the ceiling and lowers a rope of tied together bed sheets. Robin and Eddie make it through, landing on a suspiciously stained mattress, but when it's Nancy's turn, things go horribly wrong. Instead of falling back into the trailer, Nancy plummets into a nightmare vision. She lands in an empty, vine-covered pool from Steve's house, where she sees the decaying body of Barb. Vecna's voice echoes, asking if she remembers what she did, leaving Barb alone to die. He tells her he never forgets a kill, and Nancy is now squarely in his sights. We have to check in on Elle, though, and unfortunately, she's still struggling. She can't even crush a soda can. So Dr. Brenner takes a drastic step, forcing her to relive the day of the lab massacre. We see a young Elle being bullied, and when one of the kids, too, smugly calls her clumsy, Brenner brutally shocks him with a collar as a warning to the others. Later, the mysterious orderly pulls Elle aside for a chess game, and in a hushed tone reveals the truth. Brenner wants the other children to kill her because he's afraid of her power. He's been setting her up. The orderly gives her a key card and a plan to escape. Elle uses the card to break out and meets the orderly in the basement. He reveals he can't leave because of a tracker in his neck. In a powerful moment, Elle uses her abilities to rip it out for him. But as guards swarm them, the orderly reveals his secret. He has powers too. He effortlessly kills the guards and then shows Elle the tattoo on his wrist, 001. He tells her they are alike and tells her to hide. When Elle emerges, she finds a bloodbath. Brenner is unconscious, and the other children and guards are brutally murdered. She finds one in the Rainbow Room, covered in blood, having slaughtered everyone. He asks why she cries for them, telling her he knows what it's like to be different and alone. This revelation violently pulls us back to Nancy, who has just escaped Vecna's pool vision and is now trapped in another one of his memories. She sees a young Victor Creel and his family moving into their new home. The camera focuses on the son, Henry, and we get the ultimate reveal. Henry Creel is number one. He monologues to a horrified Elle, explaining how he saw humans as a pestilence and found inspiration in Black Widow spiders, solitary predators who feed on the weak. He saw society's order as a straitjacket, and in this new home, he found his true monstrous purpose. The nice orderly and the monster are one and the same. Chapter 8, Papa. The episode opens with the immediate aftermath of Elle's showdown. As Dr. Brenner demands to know what she's done, a defined Elle loses consciousness. But in the present, Nancy is still trapped in Vecna's vision, witnessing the final piece of the puzzle, Henry Creel being branded as one. Vecna then shows Nancy his endgame, a future where Hawkins is torn apart by massive gates, engulfed in flames, and overrun by an army of monsters from the Upside Down. He releases her, and she staggers back to the real world to deliver the horrifying news. The team realizes Vecna's clock has been chiming 4 times for a reason. With 3 victims, he's opened 3 gates. He only needs one more kill to complete his 4th gate and unleash hell on Hawkins. Nancy's solution? Go back into the Upside Down and kill him. Everyone is understandably terrified, but Dustin theorizes they can use his one weakness against him. When he's in a trance attacking someone, his physical body is defenseless. The only problem? They don't know who he'll attack next. In a moment of incredible bravery, Max volunteers to be the bait. Back in Russia, where Hopper and the crew are planning their escape, Hopper and Joyce share a tender moment where he cynically jokes about being easier to like when he was dead, but the sentimentality is cut short. They stumble upon a gruesome Soviet lab containing a mortally wounded demodog and tanks full of dormant creatures, but the most chilling find is a massive swirling chamber of shadow particles, a clear sign the Russians have been experimenting with the Upside Down on a terrifying scale. Hopper's crew escapes the prison through the sewers and regroups at Yuri's stash house. His grand plan for getting them to America? A helicopter named Katinka, which has never actually been flown. Faced with almost certain death, they try to call Dr. Owens, but have to speak in code with the KGB listening and no guarantee of a callback. The situation is beyond desperate. In Hawkins, the team knows they need serious firepower to take down Vecna. Eddie leads a chaotic mission to steal an RV, which Steve drives to a survivalist store called Warzone. At the store, they load up on weapons and kerosene. Robin gets her heart broken, seeing her crush, Vicky, with a guy, and Nancy has a tense standoff with a deranged Jason. They manage to get out without a fight, but the clock is ticking. Meanwhile, 11, now fully powered up, has remotely witnessed her friend's suicide mission. She demands to be sent to Hawkins, but Brenner refuses, claiming she isn't ready and that Vecna grows stronger with every victim. When Owens tries to help, Brenner's guards seize him. Brenner reveals his true colors, locking Elle in and declaring they will finish their work together. But Elle confronts him with the devastating truth. All the death and destruction from the first gate to the Mind Flayer happened because Brenner couldn't let Henry go. As Elle turns to leave, Brenner injects her with a sedative, She throws him back with her powers, but it's too late. She wakes up defeated with a shock collar around her neck. Papa has won this round, and our heroes are on their own. Meanwhile, the California crew is racing towards the Nina Project, following Susie's coordinates. In the back of the van, Mike confesses his deepest fear to Will, that Elle will realize she doesn't need him, that he's just a random nerd who got lucky. That's when Will gives Mike the painting he's been hiding. It shows the party fighting a dragon, with Mike as their leader. In an emotional speech, Will explains that Elle needs Mike. He tells him that she pushes him away because she's terrified of losing him, and that Mike makes her feel like she's not a mistake for being different. It's a raw, heartfelt moment that feels like far more than just a message from Elle. Their journey hits a snag when Argyle spots massive tire tracks, revealing the military has found the base. But this chaos creates an opportunity. At the base, Brunner is shot while trying to escape with a drugged Elle. As a helicopter moves in for the kill, Elle stands and brings it down in a spectacular display of her restored power. The Surfer Boy pizza van arrives just in time, reuniting her with Mike and Will. As Elle embraces Will, her shock collar unlocks. She turns to see a dying Brenner who begs her for forgiveness, claiming everything he did was to protect her. But Elle's face hardens. She lets go of his hand and delivers the final definitive line, "Goodbye, Papa." She walks away, leaving her past behind for good. The episode ends with our heroes finally converging. The Hawkins crew, armed to the teeth, heads to the Creel's house. Max and the others step out, their faces set with grim determination. The final battle for Hawkins is about to begin. Chapter 9. The Piggyback. The final chapter begins in Russia, where Hopper and Joyce finally steal a moment alone. They talk about their missed date at Enzo's and share a kiss we've been waiting seasons for. But the moment is cut short by an urgent call from Dr. Owen's team, revealing that Elle and the kids have gone to fight a war in Hawkins. Joyce hatches a daring plan. The shadow particles they saw are part of a hive mind. If they can destroy them back in the prison, it might give the kids in Hawkins a fighting chance. They split up, with Murray and Joyce joining Hopper on a suicide mission back in the demon-infested prison. Inside, they find chaos. The Demodogs have broken loose and slaughtered the guards. Hopper, in a truly insane move, decides to use himself as bait to lure the monsters into the pit for a fiery ambush. The plan starts with him whistling to attract a Demodog and then sprinting for his life. Meanwhile, Elle and the California crew figure out their own way to help. Elle will piggyback into Max's mind when Vecna attacks, creating a psychic bridge to fight him from the inside. And where do you build a sensory deprivation tank in an emergency? A Surfer Boy pizza freezer, of course. Argyle saves the day once again. Back in Hawkins, the team puts their dangerous plan into motion. It's a 4-phase operation. Get to the Upside Down, have Max bait Vecna, draw away his bat army, and then burn his physical body. As Steve, Nancy, and Robin head for the Creel House, Dustin and Eddie fortify Eddie's trailer. The battle for Hawkins is officially on. With Vecna not taking the bait, Max resorts to her last, most desperate move. She gives him exactly what he preys on her deepest guilt and sorrow, confessing she wanted Billy to die and asking to be taken away. But Lucas's horrified reaction reveals she's already under Vecna's influence, his voice twisting as he tells her she'll be the final sacrifice. The bait is set. On a trailer roof in the Upside Down, Eddie honors Chrissy with a blistering cover of Metallica's Master of Puppets, creating the ultimate distraction. It works perfectly, drawing the entire horde of Demobats away from the Creel House and toward him. As Steve, Nancy, and Robin move in, Max hides in her happiest memory, the snowball. But Vecna shatters the illusion, turning the dance bloody and revealing he can see her friends, feeling them dying. The clock is running out. And Vecna isn't bluffing. In the Creel House, Vines chokes Steve, Nancy, and Robin. In Hawkins, Jason attacks Lucas, and at the trailer, the Demobats break in, forcing a retreat. Dustin escapes, but Eddie lets go of the rope. Ignoring Steve's no heroics rule, he charges out on his bike, drawing the bats away to buy more time. He's swarmed and brutally attacked. Back inside Max's mind, it's all over. Vecna has her pinned to the wall, his claws raised for the final blow, but in a blaze of glory, 11 appears, blocking his path. The psychic showdown we've waited for is here, but Vecna is just too powerful. He hurls her back into his own mindscape and traps her with vines. With Elle neutralized, he turns back to an unconscious Max ready to finish the job. Elle tries one last plea, blaming Brenner for creating him, but Vecna reveals a universe-shattering truth. He tells Elle when she banished him, she didn't send him to hell. She sent him to a new world, a blank slate, and in that world, he found the shadow particles and shaped them himself into the Mind Flayer. The entire threat they've been fighting for 4 seasons. It was all him. He was the original villain all along. As Vecna lifts Max for the final sacrifice, Mike finally shouts the words he should have said episodes ago, "I love you, Elle." Fueled by that, Elle breaks free. And at that exact moment back in Russia, Hopper and Murray succeed in their plan, setting the monster pit ablaze. The psychic feedback hits Vecna. He screams in agony, and the vines holding Steve, Nancy, and Robin release. Seeing their chance, the Hawkins crew set him on fire. It seems like they've won. Hopper beheads the Demogorgon in a heroic swing. Vecna is engulfed in flames, but this is Stranger Things, and victories always come at a cost. Dustin rushes to Eddie's side, but it's too late. In an utterly devastating scene, Eddie, bleeding out from the Demobat attacks, tells Dustin, "I didn't run away this time, right?" Making Dustin promise to look after the Hellfire Club, he shares a final emotional, "I love you, man," before he dies. I am not okay. But the worst is yet to come. Elle wasn't quite fast enough. Vecna had already completed the ritual. Max's limbs snap, and her eyes cloud over. The fourth and final chime rings out, and Hawkins literally begins to split apart as the fourth gate tears through the town. As Max cries that she doesn't want to die, she goes limp in Lucas's arms. She's gone. The gate is open. Vecna's plan succeeded. But Elle, sobbing in her void, refuses to accept it. In a move we don't understand, she reaches out and places her hand over Max's heart, pouring all her power into it as the screen fades to black. 2 days later, and Hawkins is a disaster zone. The official story is a massive, unprecedented earthquake, but we know the truth. The death toll is climbing, and in a cruel twist, Eddie is still being blamed as a satanic cult leader behind it all. In a heartbreaking moment, Dustin finds Eddie's uncle and tells him the real story, that his nephew died a hero, saving a town that never understood him. The California and Hawkins crews finally reunite, but there is clear tension between Nancy and Jonathan. And then we get to Max. The group visits Max in the hospital where Lucas has been keeping a vigil. She's alive, but just barely. Clinically dead for a minute before being miraculously revived. But when Elle tries to find her in the void, there's nothing. No trace of her consciousness. Max's mind is just gone. But we do get one pure cathartic moment. Hopper and Elle are finally reunited at the cabin, sharing a tearful, bitchin' hug. The peace shatters when Will feels a familiar chill. The group looks up to see the sky darkening with ash falling like snow. They follow the decay to a field where the grass is dying, turning that sickly gray blue of the Upside Down. And in the distance, the sky is torn open with red lightning. The battle may be over, but the war for Hawkins has only just begun. If you made it this far, thank you so much. You are a hero. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like below, comment, and tell us what your favorite part of Season 4 was, what you're excited for in Season 5. We're very excited to cover it. If you want to see our coverage, please stop on by. We'll be covering all the episodes, all the parts, maybe even on Christmas Day. I don't know. Don't tell my fiance that. Anyway, thank you for stopping by. We will see you very soon. Peace.